Chapter 286. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Just then, the bronze immortal palace shook violently again. The continuous vibrations seemed to be filled with resentment. Even the Alcade's sacred master, the master of the Jiang family, and the other powerful figures on the battlefield could sense the intense killing intent. Look, it's out, it's out. How? How is this possible? On the battlefield, while the cultivators were fighting with the ancient creatures, they had been paying attention to the bronze immortal palace. When the skeletal hand in front of the immortal palace retracted, a black light flashed out, and a cultivator screamed. However, when the cultivators saw the black light clearly, they were all shocked. It was as if they had seen a ghost in the daytime, and their faces were filled with disbelief. This was a young child with soft hair draped over his shoulders. He floated next to Chu Bei and jumped up and down, like a little fairy dancing under the moonlight. He was only 4 or 5 years old. He was chubby, white, and cute. There was a pair of white wings behind the child's back, and there were 2 pupils in his eyes. He was obviously not a descendant of the human race. Why is there a child in the bronze immortal palace? Where is the skeleton from before? What does this child have to do with the skeleton? The Alcade's sacred master, Tu Tian, and the other powerful figures fixed their gazes on the child. Their expressions changed drastically, and they could not calm down. If it was anywhere else, anyone would love such a cute and adorable child. However, no one would have such feelings here. To them, facing this unknown child was more like facing a formidable enemy. They were ready to fight at any moment. The children surrounded Chu Bei and sized him up with curiosity in their eyes. There was no sign of danger at all. Fake. It's all fake. Suddenly, Crazy Ol laughed maniacally. Then, his eyes narrowed, and the 2 beams of light merged into one. They penetrated the sea of clouds and hit the child directly. Roar. Suddenly, the child let out a shrill roar. Then, his whole body was shrouded in black fog. Layers of flesh fell off, and he became a white skeleton in the end. Amidst the eerie sound of friction, the white skeleton continued to expand. In an instant, it was 5 meters tall, and a thick evil aura filled the air. It's him, the skeleton from before. I was almost deceived by the child it transformed into. What exactly is it? There's clearly no aura of life, so how can it be like a living thing? Who was the previous owner of this corpse? Is he the master of this bronze immortal palace? On the battlefield below the clouds, the battle gradually calmed down. The gazes of all the cultivators were directed at White Bones and Chu Bei. The ancient era's organisms all stopped fighting and looked at the skeleton with reverence. Die! With a syllable that sounded like it came from hell, a giant skeletal palm pierced through the purple clouds and appeared above Crazy Ol's head in an instant. Rumble. But before the skeletal hand could reach Crazy Ol, a huge sword ray appeared and slammed into the skeletal hand. In the sound of the sword, 2 kinds of destructive energy intertwined and merged, and finally dissipated between heaven and earth at the same time. Facing Chu Bei, White Bones let out a low roar. Before the roar faded away, White Bones' body shook violently, and then a black fog appeared all over its body. When the black fog dissipated, White Bones seemed to have evolved. Its body was covered with a layer of black fog armor. At the same time, 2 red lights shot out from its eyes. After slightly changing its appearance, White Bones took a step forward. The endless purple sea of clouds below suddenly rolled like waves. The space fragments around its body were constantly peeled off, and a series of pitch-black slender space gaps spread out like a spider web. The next moment, White Bones slapped at Chu Bei with its palm. As the palm fell, the bronze immortal palace behind it suddenly stopped trembling. Heaven and earth became dead silent, as if all living things had become dead. All the cultivators, including Alcade's Saint Master, the master of the Jiang family, Tu Tian, and the other powerful figures, suddenly found that their bodies were imprisoned again at this moment. Time and space seemed to have stopped at this moment. The only thing moving between heaven and earth was the palm of White Bones in front of the bronze immortal palace. Bang! The bone palm fell and hit Chu Bei's chest. To be precise, it was 5 centimeters away from his chest. A soft and deep collision sound rang out in this silent world. The moment the bone palm hit, the silence dissipated, and everything returned to normal. What's going on? The cultivators regained their freedom and looked at White Bones and Chu Bei in front of the bronze immortal palace in confusion. Logically speaking, White Bones' palm should have been able to shatter the river and destroy the void. Even the repercussions alone had imprisoned the heaven and earth within a radius of 100 miles. However, such a terrifying palm hit Chu Bei, who didn't dodge at all. It was really like a casual slap, and it didn't hurt at all. Huh. In front of the bronze immortal palace, White Bones retracted its bone palm and muttered in a very human-like manner. Its transparent eyes with 2 spots of red light were faintly confused. Swordfall. Chu Bei looked at Baigu with a smile that was not a smile. After 2 indifferent syllables came out of his mouth, he extended his hand and beckoned. An incomparably huge gap appeared above the bronze immortal palace. In the soul-stirring sound of the sword, the 8 blood-red sword rays intertwined into a beam of light. Brontosaurus vaguely appeared in the beam of light, and the sizzling sound was deafening. What a terrifying sword! It actually produced lightning. It's even more terrifying than the thunder calamity. Looking at the beam of light intertwined by the sword rays in the gap, the Ji family master, Tu Tian, and the rest of the Almighties were horrified. At their level, they would have to go through a thunder calamity every time they broke through a small realm. After going through the thunder calamity, their cultivation level would improve. If they failed to go through the thunder calamity, they would die. Although the lightning that appeared in the beam of light formed by the sword rays above the bronze immortal palace contained a terrifying power that was rapidly compressed and restrained, they could still feel that the power of the lightning was far more powerful than the thunder calamity that they had to go through when they were almighties by 100 or even 1,000 times. Oh my Buddha, no wonder he's my future backer. Terrifying. Feeling the terrifying sword momentum and the dense power of the lightning, the fat Taoist priest, Duanda, swallowed his saliva and shrunk his neck instinctively. Rumble. There was a loud sound, and the beam of light that Chu Bei shot above the bronze immortal palace landed on White Bones. Crack. In the blink of an eye, the beam of light that was thousands of feet tall was injected into White Bones. With a crisp sound, a crack appeared on White Bones' skull. Insulting the Emperor corpse, die. A roar filled with murderous intent suddenly reverberated between heaven and earth. Insulting the Emperor corpse, die. The roar that filled the sky was mixed with fierce murderous intent. The rolling lightning beam bombarded White Bones, and the crack on White Bones' skull healed as the roar spread. Whoosh! White Bones roared angrily. The sea of clouds boiled, and 2 beams of blood-red light shot into the sky from its transparent eyes. With itself as the center, a majestic black mist spread out far and wide, intertwining and merging with the endless purple sea of clouds. Emperor corpse. Could it be that he was a great emperor? The emperor realm, what kind of existence is that? Who can tell me the complete cultivation system? Below, the crowd of cultivators looked up at the sky that was like 18 levels of hell, and their expressions changed drastically. An inexplicable fear surged into their hearts. In front of the bronze immortal palace, endless murderous intent rushed toward Chu Bei like surging heat waves, surrounding him from all directions. Emperor corpse? You're just a quasi-emperor. What's more, you've been dead for tens of thousands of years, and your divine consciousness has long been destroyed. Now, you're just a corpse that has accumulated tens of thousands of years of cultivation. What qualifications do you have to be called an emperor? Chu Bei sneered, his black hair fluttering in the wind, and his eyes were deep. He stood in the void and stared indifferently at White Bones. He had no fear, and was incomparably calm and serene. I'll take you as my servant. White Bones' blood-red light was fixed on Chu Bei's body, and as soon as his voice faded, a monstrous light lit up behind him. Could that be the immortal king descending to the 9th heaven? One of the most terrifying strange phenomena in the ancient times. My heavens, I didn't expect to see such a strange phenomenon in my life. Looking at the strange phenomenon that White Bones displayed, The crowd of cultivators, including the mighty experts, widened their eyes at the same time, and their mouths were wide open, expressing the shock in their hearts. Behind white bones, a huge blurry figure comparable to the bronze immortal palace appeared, sitting high up in the ninth heaven and surrounded by mysterious yellow chi, like an immortal king overlooking the common people. Chi, chi. White bones stood in the void and glanced below, only to hear a cold snort. Suddenly, the sea of purple clouds filled with black chi turned into a huge tornado. Oh no! Seeing the cloud tornado pressing down, the Alcade's sacred leader, the G family patriarch, and the other mighty experts' expressions changed. Without hesitation, they took out their extreme Tao weapons and attacked. The aura of the cloud tornado made their hearts palpitate. If they really allowed it to fall, not only the cultivators present, but the residents within a 100-mile radius would also be implicated. Perhaps within a few breaths, the area within a 100-mile radius, or even wider area, would become a sea of blood. The 8 mighty experts didn't hold back at all and used their extreme Tao weapons with all their might. The other cultivators seemed to have realized the seriousness of the matter, and their sea of spiritual chi shook, sparing no effort to attack the sky. Chi, chi, chi. However, just as the cultivators found it difficult to resist the cloud tornado, which was more like a natural disaster, Chu Bei held the Xinyuan sword with both hands. He suddenly swung it. Amidst the sound of the sword, a barrier formed by the fusion of brilliant light appeared out of thin air. The barrier was like a sea of clouds, and one couldn't see the end of it. It forcibly separated the sea of clouds from the ground below. The tornado with the power to destroy heaven and earth was also blocked by this barrier. 9 heavens soared descent. With the appearance of the barrier, the pressure on the cultivators instantly disappeared. At that moment, for indifferent syllables reverberated between heaven and earth. Chu Bei threw the Xinyuan sword in his hand into the sky. In the next moment, the sky was filled with lightning, and the rumbling continued. Tens of thousands of Xinyuan swords appeared from the lightning. Chu Bei's body expanded several times. To be precise, he was no longer a human, but a human-shaped lightning bolt. Is that the phenomenon that Boss Chu displayed? Who can tell me what kind of phenomenon this is? Why is there no record of it in the ancient books? It's directly transformed from his main body. Can this still be called a phenomenon? The cultivators below looked at the distant sky in astonishment. In almost an instant, the lightning giant that Chu Bei had transformed into with the Xinyuan sword in his hand was already tens of thousands of feet tall, and he faced the immortal king phenomenon of the skeleton. Who are you? The skeleton shook its head, and cold, emotionless words slowly came out of its mouth. At the same time, it raised its right hand, and the huge immortal king projection behind it reached out a large hand and slapped towards the lightning giant that Chu Bei had transformed into. The moment the skeleton raised its hand, the spiritual energy in this world seemed to be isolated and sucked away. It was as if it was standing in another starry sky, and leisurely celestial music sounded. The ethereal celestial music was melodious, as if it flowed over from ancient times. It resonated with the great Tao and was filled with an inexplicable charm. At some point, a misty white fog had appeared around the skeleton, as if it was standing in a pure land of the immortal world. However, the killing intent within was surging. Even with the sword light barrier, the cultivators below only felt their bodies cracking, their internal organs injured, their souls on the verge of destruction, and their bones on the verge of melting. Boundless killing intent. The hearts of the Alcade's sacred leader, the Jiang family's patriarch, and the other mighty figures turned cold. They were so shocked that they quickly took out their supreme weapons. The celestial music sounded with boundless killing intent. It was as if heaven and earth were collapsing. It was extremely terrifying. Buzz. The attack of the immortal king and the phenomenon controlled by the skeleton covered the sky and the earth. The huge hand covered the sky and collided intensely with the Tao music in the world. If I were you, I would continue to hibernate for 10,000 years. The lightning giant that Chu Bei had transformed into stood still in the void. Jade-green light lingered around the Xinyuan sword, as if it had evolved into a small world that floated in the nine heavens. Above his head, 10,000 bolts of lightning fell like a waterfall. There were all kinds of lightning of various colors. His huge eyes flickered with lightning, and his appearance was solemn like that of a god. He was clearly above everyone's heads, but he gave off a very ethereal illusion. It was as if he was standing on the other side of the starry sky, isolated from another world that could not be touched. In the dead silence, under everyone's shocked gazes, the immortal king's palm tore through the void and struck the lightning giant. Dong! The might of the enormous palm was peerless. The Dao music it carried was like an army of a million fighting. It pierced through metal and cracked rocks, swept through the sky, and was like a tsunami that connected the heavens and caused countless stars to fall. This palm was murderous like a tide. It was like a mighty army was galloping. The stars and moon were dim, and it caused the sky to collapse. It was a world-shocking attack. However, it was such a palm strike that didn't shake the lightning giant at all. However, unlike before, all the cultivators present here saw the layer of ripples that arose outside the lightning giant with their own eyes. At the instant the enormous palm struck the lightning giant, a layer of ripples appeared on the enormous sword in the lightning giant's hand. The ripples trembled as they forcibly absorbed all the heaven-shaking, earth-shattering power contained in the giant palm. Chapter 287. What's that? How could it ignore such a powerful attack? Is this boss Chu's defense? It's so terrifying. Why do I feel that the ripples created by the sword have the same devouring power as my clay pot? But it's even more terrifying. No, that's not devouring power. It should be purifying power. That skeleton's attack was purified directly. All the cultivators looked at the scene in the sky in shock. What kind of technique is this? Duanda stared at the lightning giant in front of the bronze celestial palace without blinking. His mouth was wide open, and his eyeballs were about to fall out. Boss is already in an invincible position. Ji Ziwe's eyes lit up. If only I had this ability. Even if I could only purify a Dragon Realm expert, I would be satisfied. The old lunatic, who was occupying a corner of the void, was startled, and his ramblings stopped in his mouth. Why? In front of the bronze celestial palace, Baigu shot out 2 blood-red light beams from its eyes and hit the ripples. With a sizzling sound, the light beams disappeared. What followed was its stiff, resentful voice filled with unwillingness. Chu Bei didn't answer Baigu's question. Instead, he turned into a lightning giant and started to wield the Xinyuan sword, which was thousands of times larger. 8 extremities, boundless expanse. In the next moment, a cold voice drifted in the sky. The giant sword with lightning slashed down at Baigu. Wherever it passed, 8 Dao runes appeared. The runes intertwined and formed various ancient divine beasts. Dragon Yin rises, Phoenix Lin fights, White Tiger roars at the moon, Longevity Turtle soars. Thunder rumbled in the sky. The visible sound waves turned into ripples and instantly blasted the boundless purple sea of clouds into nothingness. Clang! Chu Bei was like a deity. He didn't move, but the giant sword of lightning had already moved the sun and the moon. This, looking at the dazzling giant sword of lightning, the Alcade's sacred master, the Jiang family head, Tu Tian, and the other almighties were terrified. At this moment, their sea of reincarnation phenomenon was completely suppressed. It was as if they had met their king, and they were unable to use it at all. Looking at the surrounding ancient creatures, they instinctively prostrated themselves in the air and kowtowed repeatedly. While letting out miserable wails, they smashed into the mountain range below. Crack! The giant lightning sword finally swung down. Following a crisp sound, White Bone raised its head and let out a painful howl. Its roar was world-shaking, and the violent sound waves directly tore apart the sky. The bronze immortal palace behind it also trembled violently, releasing continuous ear-splitting sounds. Under the gazes of everyone present, the skeleton was slashed into 2 at the waist by the enormous lightning sword. Moreover, The two halves of the skeleton transformed into numerous pieces of bone under the might of the Grand Tao talisman markings. In an instant, the originally intact skeleton turned into countless pieces amidst the soul-stirring sword cry, piling up in the air in front of the bronze immortal palace. Chila, the huge lightning sword soared through the sky and turned to slash at the immortal king descending to the nine heavens phenomenon. In an instant, the phenomenon dissipated, and the heavens and the earth fell into a deathly silence. Is that immemorial emperor corpse destroyed? Maybe, but it's already turned into a pile of ashes. Is this boss Chu's true strength? Below, a group of cultivators murmured as they stared at the distant sky, their expressions somewhat dazed. You deserve to die. However, this abnormal, deathly silence lasted for about 30 seconds. Just when everyone thought the battle was over, the pile of ashes in front of the bronze immortal palace released a blood-red light. Then, under everyone's incredulous gazes, the ashes merged together and turned back into the complete skeleton from before. It didn't die even like that? Could it be that at that level, it's really immortal? Maybe. After all, even almighty experts can regrow parts of their limbs, let alone them. Looking at the restored skeleton in front of the bronze immortal palace, the faces of the cultivators instantly turned ashen. It didn't die even like that, Duanda cursed fiercely. Roar. Roar that sounded like it came from hell came out of the skeleton's mouth once again. In the next moment, spots of red light, with its body as the center, directly penetrated the lightning barrier and sprinkled down like a rain of blood. As the red light spread, the eyes of the ancient creatures that were crawling on the ground suddenly became bloodshot, their muscles and bones exposed, and they rushed toward the sword light barrier as if they had gone mad. Amidst the sizzling sounds, the ancient creatures rushed forward one after another, and when they touched the sword light barrier, they were all ravaged by the sword chi and turned into minced meat. However, their blood essence was instantly wrapped by the red light and quickly passed through the barrier and into the skeleton's body. Almost at the same time, the skeleton underwent another change. Flesh and blood began to grow out of the originally eerily white bones. After plundering the blood essence of thousands of ancient creatures, the spots of red light targeted the group of human cultivators and demons. Not good. Looking at the strange red light surging toward them, Alcade's sacred master was the first to react, and his pupils suddenly shrank. Soon, the group of cultivators reacted, and fear emerged on their faces. They saw with their own eyes that the ancient creatures went mad under the red light and crashed uncontrollably into the barrier, and finally turned into blood essence that was swallowed by the skeleton. Chi. Fortunately, before the countless red light touched the human cultivators, tens of millions of tiny lightning needles appeared out of thin air, and in the blink of an eye, the red light was extinguished. You shouldn't have appeared here. Baigu was no longer a pure skeleton. Instead, he had turned into a man with flesh and blood. He was wearing a black gold battle armor that was as translucent as black jade. The cold black metal made his skin look even more delicate and white. The black gold battle armor made him look even more heroic. His eyes were like water, and his hair danced in the wind. He held a black bone sword in his hand. If one didn't see it with their own eyes, they wouldn't be able to connect this valiant man with white bones from before. Slaughter all living things and absorb all their essence. I will eventually take one step at a time until I reach that impossible realm. After White Bones transformed into a man, his words were no longer stiff. Instead, there was some emotion in his words. Be my servant and be eternally loyal. This is your chance. The man stood in front of the bronze immortal palace. His black gold battle armor flickered, and his black bone sword was intimidating. He was incomparably conceited. Where does your confidence come from? Chu Bei's mocking voice drifted between heaven and earth. Boom. The man was as still as a mountain, but his blood chi soared into the sky. Behind him, the immortal king descending to the nine heavens phenomenon appeared again, but it rapidly compressed until it became one with him. At this moment, the man transformed from White Bones seemed to have transformed into that immortal king. With a raise of his hand, He seemed to be able to cut open the world. Buzz! The bone sword in the man's hand vibrated, and it was as heavy as a mountain, almost crushing the space as he pressed forward step by step. Is this the legendary unification of oneself with the phenomenon? All the cultivators were stunned. Obviously, they didn't expect the rumor passed down from ancient times to be true, and they saw it with their own eyes today. The ending won't change. As his indifferent voice fell, the thunder giant that Chu Bei had transformed into suddenly shrank. In the end, his body was about the same size as the skeleton man. Buzz! Chu Bei gently waved the Xinyuan sword, cutting through the sky. His momentum was no weaker than the skeleton man's bone sword. In fact, the huge bronze immortal palace resonated with the sound of thunder at this moment. Die! The skeleton man's black gold battle armor bloomed with brilliance. He raised the bone sword in his hand high, and his voice shook the sky. Chu Bei was fearless. He also raised the Xinyuan sword high. The runes on the sword flickered, and thunder snakes surged. The two swords swung at the same time. In the distant sky, there was a deathly silence. This wasn't a pure collision of swords. It was more like a kind of comprehension of the great Tao, a contest between Tao. The skeleton man's sword landed on Chu Bei's body, but it was blocked by a layer of ripples that appeared out of nowhere. This sword still couldn't split open the layer of ripples. The sword in Chu Bei's hand landed on the skeleton man's body. The black gold battle armor instantly turned into nothingness. Then, with a scream, the skeleton man was drowned by the sword light. For a time, the world was eternal, and only the skeleton man's wails were left. The lightning dissipated, and the skeleton man turned into a pile of ashes again. Thunder of the nine heavens. Seeing that the pile of ashes showed signs of merging again, Chu Bei waved the Xinyuan sword again. 9 colored thunderbolts shot out from the tip of the sword, interweaving into a huge net. In the soul-stirring sound of thunder, the huge net instantly lifted the unformed ashes. Then, under the control of Chu Bei, it flew toward the forbidden area of the remote antiquity. Since you've been watching for so long, this is an opportunity that I'm giving you. Chu Bei's eyes shot out 2 deep green lights, which shone through the sky and shone on the highest sacred mountain in the forbidden area of the remote antiquity. Rumble. Suddenly, just as Chu Bei's voice fell and everyone was puzzled, a few black spots appeared at the foot of the sacred mountain. Then, they became bigger and bigger in the eyes of the cultivators, and there was a burst of wind and thunder. In the blink of an eye, 9 huge objects appeared above the sacred mountain, like 9 black rivers falling down. What are those things? Coffins. They look like coffins. Why is there such a big coffin in the forbidden area of the remote antiquity? What kind of existence is buried in it? The 9 big guys pulling the coffin. Are they really the ancient divine beasts, true dragons? 9 dragons pulling a coffin. I've seen it before. 2 days ago, it just landed in the forbidden area of the remote antiquity. What did Boss Chu mean earlier? Could it be that he has something to do with the 9 dragons pulling a coffin? Looking at the scene above the sacred mountain, all the cultivators, including the Alcade sacred master, the head of the Jiang family, Tu Tian, and the other almighty experts, froze and looked at each other in shock. Above the forbidden area of the remote antiquity, 9 huge dragon corpses were pulling an ancient bronze coffin, slowly approaching the pile of ashes that were bound by lightning. Each of the 9 dragon corpses was 100 meters long, as if they were made of molten iron, and they were full of shocking power. They were all 5-clawed black dragons. Except for their crystal-clear dragon horns, which were shining with purple light, their bodies were black, and their scales were shining with mysterious brilliance in the darkness. Chapter 288. Oh my God! 9 dragons pulling a coffin. How shocking! Looking at the 9 dragon corpses that looked like they were made of molten iron and the ancient bronze coffin that exuded an ancient aura, the fat Taoist priest was stunned and could not help but sigh. Ji Ziyue was also stunned. Her mouth was wide open, and one could see her small canine teeth that were shining with a cold light. Among all the people present, no one was more shocked than Yi Fan. When he saw the 9 dragons pulling the coffin again, His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. After all, he had come here riding on this coffin. Ah! Suddenly, the familiar mournful wail was heard again. Looking over, the skeleton was partially formed, but when it saw the 9 dragons pulling the coffin, there was obviously some fear in its wail. It was a kind of instinctive fear. In the giant lightning net, the skeleton struggled and even cried out pitifully in Chu Bei's direction from time to time. Clang! With the sound of metal clanging, the huge bronze coffin lid fell off, and a dazzling light shot out from the coffin. Then, the open bronze coffin seemed to have turned into a terrifying black hole that could swallow heaven and earth, and an unparalleled suction force instantly wrapped around the skeleton. The skeleton struggled wildly, and the immortal King Avatar appeared again. Its whole body emitted a hazy light, but it still could not get rid of the giant lightning net. In the end, it was forcibly sent into the bronze coffin by the latter. As the lid of the coffin was closed, the mournful wails of the skeletons gradually faded away. Rumble. In the buzzing sound, under everyone's gaze, the 9 dragon corpses danced and dragged the ancient bronze coffin back to the bottom of the sacred mountain. At this time, a graceful woman appeared on the sacred mountain. The woman was so beautiful that it felt unreal. She was clearly on the sacred mountain, but it felt like she was in the celestial world. The woman's beautiful hair and clothes fluttered, and her slender figure was peerlessly beautiful. Her pair of beautiful eyes looked at Chu Bei through the void, and she was like a transcendent immortal. The woman gave people an illusion. Just when they thought they could see her beautiful face clearly, it became blurry again. They couldn't recall her appearance for a while. His otherworldly temperament did not seem to belong to this world. There was a kind of otherworldly aura that gave people the feeling that he could ascend to immortality at any time. The woman stood quietly on the sacred mountain, her calm eyes looking at Chu Bei in silence. Who is that woman? Is she alive or dead? No, it's more like a phantom. She's formless. When I look at her, I suddenly think of a great empress who shocked both the ancient and the modern. You're talking about Ruthless? No. No way. Could she be ruthless? Illusion. It must be an illusion. The group of cultivators stared blankly at the illusory woman at the top of the holy mountain. Discussions broke out among them as astonishment filled their faces. Chu Bei looked straight at the woman, his face expressionless as well. The woman standing across from him was none other than Ruthless Great Emperor. She was a peerless beauty who had once slaughtered her way through the 9 heavens and 10 earths. She was a wondrous woman who made all the experts in the universe tremble. She was the most talented great empress in history, the most talented woman since ancient times. She was also the most ruthless person since ancient times. She fought against the heavens, the earth, and herself. She killed all the kings and stood alone in the 9 heavens. Not even the gods could stop her. She finally reached the peak with an inferior body and became the most powerful and unique great empress since ancient times. Chu Bei looked at Ruthless. To be exact, it was a clone left behind by her. He felt a sense of loss. This was the first time he faced the great empress of shrouding heaven, even though it was just a clone. After a long time, in the end, the woman disappeared from everyone's sight. She didn't say a word from beginning to end. Is that woman really Ruthless Great Empress? Could it be that this forbidden area of the primordial era is her dojo? Is the battle over? That skeleton was sent into the ancient bronze coffin by Boss Chu. What's the origin of the ancient bronze coffin? Who knows? After cultivating for hundreds of years, I realized that there are still too many unknowns. I don't even know the complete cultivation system. These existences can kill powerful experts with a lift of their fingers. I'm afraid there are still many levels between the Great Empress and the Great Empress. Above the mountain range, a group of cultivators first looked at the direction where the mysterious woman disappeared, then looked at Chu Bei in front of the bronze immortal palace. After recovering from their daze, a commotion broke out. It's dead, it's dead. Crazy Ol's eyes were filled with melancholy. His body swayed and gradually disappeared into the horizon. Rumble. Suddenly, there was a deafening roar in the distant sky. Chu Bei stretched out his right hand, and a 10,000 zhonglong bolt of lightning extended from his palm, directly striking the bronze immortal palace. The immortal palace that was hovering in the sky trembled and finally landed in the mountain range. Rocks and soil flew everywhere. A group of cultivators immediately turned into rainbows and flew away. Finally, they hovered in the air and looked at the open gate of the immortal palace cautiously from 100 meters away. "Boss, what's the origin of the Nine Dragons' coffin? I've divined many times, but I still can't figure it out." Chu Bei placed his hands behind his back and slowly landed in front of the gate of the immortal palace like a god descending. The fat Taoist Duanda immediately stepped forward and asked respectfully, I can't say. Chu Bei looked at Duanda with a playful smile. "Boss, that woman seemed to have glanced at me." Yifan appeared in front of Chu Bei and said uncertainly, "This is the fate that you can't cut off." Chu Bei didn't say much. After his indifferent voice fell, he looked at the highest sacred mountain in the forbidden area of ancient desolation and recalled the battle with Baigu. Even if he had the Xinyuan sword, he couldn't kill an existence like the ancient skeletal corpse. He could only rely on the incarnation of Ruthless and the ancient bronze coffin to suppress it. When the incarnation of Ruthless appeared, he felt the true meaning of the great Tao from the ancient skeletal corpse. If they were to fight, he wouldn't be able to hurt the ancient skeletal corpse even if he had the Xinyuan sword in hand. After all, although the ancient skeletal corpse's predecessor was a quasi-emperor, its consciousness wasn't the consciousness of a quasi-emperor. It was just a spiritual body that had attached itself to the ancient skeletal corpse after tens of thousands of years. Its strength was greatly reduced. Through this battle, he also recognized the position of the system's commodity level in the Shrouding Heaven plane. Level 9, Dozun in the Battle Break plane, and Dragon Transformation in the Shrouding Heaven system. Level 10, Half-Step Mighty Figures and Mighty Figures. Level 11, Cutting Path Monarch. Level 12, Half-Step Sage. Level 13, Sage. Level 14, Sage King. Level 15, Great Sage. Level 16, Boundary Emperor. Level 17, Great Emperor. At this moment, Chu Bei could easily crush these almighty experts who held extreme weapons. However, he was far from being a match for a true emperor, even if it was the incarnation of a great emperor. "Boss, are there any more ancient creatures coming out of the bronze immortal palace?" GZUS swallowed her saliva and looked at Chu Bei nervously. She was clearly frightened by the skeletons and ancient creatures that had appeared earlier. Chu Bei glanced at GZUS and smiled knowingly. With a step, he had already stepped into the enormous bronze immortal palace. "Boss Chu has gone in. Do you think we should go in?" Even the emperor corpse couldn't do anything to him. With his cultivation level, he probably won't care about us. That's true. Boss Chu doesn't seem to be a bloodthirsty person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have saved us from danger so many times. Why don't we go in and take a look? If Boss Chu's expression doesn't look right, we'll immediately retreat. The cultivators around the bronze immortal palace looked at Chu Bei, who had entered the palace, and discussed with hesitation. Alcade Sacred Master, Zhang Family Head, Tu Tian, Peacock King, and the other mighty figures looked at each other. After communicating with their eyes, they rushed into the immortal palace at the same time. They were extremely curious about this bronze immortal palace that had existed since the Antiquity Age and appeared once every 3,000 years. "Let's go." After seeing the mighty figures enter the immortal palace, the surrounding cultivators didn't hesitate and flew into the bronze immortal palace. Skeletons, so many skeletons. After entering the palace, the first thing that appeared in everyone's sight was a pile of scattered skeletons that had died countless years ago. "Look, there are words here." A cultivator seemed to have discovered something and exclaimed. In front of him was a huge ancient corpse. The ancient corpse was lying on the ground with its jaw slightly open. It seemed to be filled with loneliness before it died. Becoming an immortal. Difficult. That cultivator's expression changed when he recognized the words that were almost dried up. The words were filled with bitterness. This person was obviously in despair before he died. "There are words." Another cultivator exclaimed and pointed at the bottom of the snow-white arm. Alcade Yang Yijin. That cultivator read out loud. Alcade's sacred master, who was not far away, was stunned. Gosh! Hearing this name, some cultivators who were well-versed in ancient books exclaimed. Their mouths were wide open, and their faces were filled with shock. Alcade's sacred master Yang Yijin is a peerless figure recorded in the ancient history of the eastern wilderness. 105,000 years ago, he dominated the eastern wilderness, and there were few who could match him. He actually died here. After a while, another skeleton caused everyone to exclaim. It was the second sacred master of the Jade Lake Sacred Master. He was also a famous existence in the eastern wilderness. Beside his skeleton, there was another line of blood-red words. Becoming an immortal is difficult. The third skeleton, the fourth skeleton, the fifth skeleton, gradually, a few more ancient corpses with names were discovered. These ancient corpses were all once the top figures in the eastern wilderness. The Bronze Immortal Palace is indeed the burial ground of peerless experts. All the experts came here like moths to a flame, searching for the hope of becoming an immortal. But in the end, they died here. Do you think the deaths of these ancient corpses have something to do with the ancient creature and that skeleton? No, our ancestor was a figure from 100,000 years ago, and Boss Chu said that the consciousness of that skeleton had only cultivated for 10,000 years. Now that I think about it, I'm afraid that the emperor in front of the skeleton died here in search of an opportunity to become an immortal. However, because of the emperor's strength, that skeleton was born. Come to think of it, how did these people die? Could it be that there is a hidden danger in this immortal palace? The cultivators looked at the countless ancient corpses and sighed. Is it so difficult to become an immortal? Is the immortal that Boss Chu mentioned the immortal that they are searching for? Did you see Boss Chu after coming in? Inside the main hall, a group of cultivators stared blankly at the eerie white bones around them with surprise in their eyes. Some cultivators also looked around as if they were looking for something. Chapter 289. Rumble. Suddenly, the Bronze Immortal Palace shook violently. Before anyone could react, a huge force appeared above their heads like the Milky Way falling, or the star domain withered. The huge pressure was suffocating. Looking up, it was misty. There was actually primal chaos surging like mist. It was hazy and indistinct, and it was drowning down below. It was as if it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. It was completely unstoppable. It was a kind of origin power. It was as if the universe had just been formed. The stars shone brightly, and the chaos was violent. It was unstoppable. This power. The cultivators' eyes widened. They felt a chill in their hearts. They knew that if they were drowned by this sudden power, they would definitely die. However, to their horror, this turbid power actually imprisoned their sea of reincarnation, causing them to be unable to move. Just as the cultivators looked at the Almighties for help, the misty power suddenly dissipated. What followed was a hazy mist that gradually filled the entire hall. This is Xianhuang Qi. Oh my God! Even a trace of Xianhuang Qi would cause a fight in the outside world. There's actually so much in this hall. In the hazy mist, the thousands of cultivators in the hall felt like they were dreaming. After being stunned for a moment, they came to their senses and exclaimed one after another. They looked extremely excited. Even the Alcade Sacred Master, Jiang Family Head, Tu Tian, Peacock King, and the other Almighties could not help but look shocked. They were filled with disbelief. Previously, they had used their extreme Dao weapons to fight to the death for the Xianhuang Qi outside the mysterious origin stone. They did not expect the Bronze Immortal Palace to be filled with Xianhuang Qi. However, just as everyone was still immersed in shock, the Xianhuang Qi that filled the entire hall suddenly went berserk. It gathered towards the center of the hall as if it had gone crazy. Looking over, they saw a figure standing in the center with his hands behind his back. His body was emitting a faint fluorescent light. It was Chu Bei, whom the cultivators were looking for. At that moment, Chu Bei was like a vortex with a terrifying suction force. He was crazily devouring the Xianhuang Qi in the hall. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. With the passage of time, The majestic chi of heaven and earth in the hall began to thin out. The system has obtained sufficient myriad chi. The host has obtained the right to use a level 15 commodity once. At the same time that the mechanical system sounded in Chu Bei's mind, the terrifying devouring force released from his body suddenly disappeared. Boss, the remaining Xinhuang Qi. Ji Ziyue tugged at Chu Bei's clothes and moved her lips slightly. Chu Bei calmly scanned his surroundings before turning to look at the cultivators below. Since you fellows have entered, this is fate. How much profound yellow energy you can absorb will depend on the limits of your bodies. Thank you, boss. Hearing Chu Bei's words, the cultivators in the hall looked at Chu Bei with incomparable gratitude, instantly boiling over. Even Alcade's Saint Master, Peacock King, and the others looked excited. Although 90% of the heaven and earth chi in the hall had been devoured by Suemo, the remaining level was more than enough for all of them to refine, and there was more than enough to spare. After all, the Xinhuang Qi was equivalent to a huge mountain. Even with the physique of the Almighties, they could only absorb a few strands, let alone the cultivators below the dragon realm. Rumble. Not long after Chu Bei landed, the bronze celestial hall shook violently. What's happening now? Everyone was shocked. It's leaving. From what I see, you should absorb as much myriad chi as possible first. When your bodies reach the limits of what they can take, you can refine it after you leave the hall, Chu Bei said nonchalantly. Hearing that, the cultivators looked at each other and no longer hesitated. Their will seas lit up as they began to absorb the Xinhuang Qi around them bit by bit. As time went by, more and more cultivators flew out of the bronze celestial hall after their bodies reached their limits. About 15 minutes later, the Alcade's sacred leader, the master of the Jiang family, and the rest of the Almighties reached their limits too. They looked at each other and left almost at the same time. On the other hand, Yifan and Duanda were still devouring crazily. Another 15 minutes passed. Duanda looked at Yifan with jealousy and took the lead to stop absorbing. At that moment, only Chu Bei, Duanda, Yifan, and Ji Ziyue, who refused to leave with the master of the Ji family, were left in the hall. An hour later, the lightning in Yifan's wheel sea disappeared. It meant that he had reached his limit. Let's go. It's leaving soon. Chu Bei pointed at the walls that were glowing brightly. With a wave of his hand, there was a flash of lightning, and he disappeared from the bronze celestial hall with Yifan and the other two. Not long after Chu Bei left, the bronze celestial hall disappeared into the void amidst the buzzing sound. At a glance, there was no one else on the battlefield that had turned into ruins apart from the dead bodies. After the cultivators obtained the Xinhuang Qi, they immediately returned to their forces to refine it. One day later, have you heard about what happened in the bronze celestial hall? Hee, I was there personally. I almost died there. I heard that Boss Chu was there again and saved all of you. Is there such a thing? Don't you know that if you want to obtain the opportunity in the bronze celestial hall, you must first break through the deadlock? The group of people from 3,000 years ago did not find the opportunity to become an immortal. Instead, they became corpses. Not only were there thousands of powerful primordial creatures in the celestial hall, but there was also an emperor's corpse. Even the Almighty with an extreme-grade weapon was nothing in front of it. Luckily, Boss Chu was there. He used his divine power to suppress the emperor's corpse. That was how we survived. Moreover, I seem to have seen the great empress recorded in the ancient books. What? That ruthless great empress? Don't tell me she knows Boss Chu? Speaking of which, what kind of opportunity did you obtain in the end? The Xinhuang Qi. In just a short time, the story of Chu Bei and the bronze celestial hall spread like wildfire across the entire eastern wilderness. 3 days after the bronze celestial hall disappeared, in the forbidden land of antiquity that was filled with spiritual qi, Yifan sat on a mountain rock with his legs crossed. His entire body was covered by Genesis qi. Above the sea of misery, a small cauldron was completely formed. It was simple and natural. Its 2 ears gave birth to yin and yang, and its 3 legs stabilized heaven and earth. The small cauldron was only an inch tall. It did not have any dazzling radiance or terrifying divine power. It only had nature and atmosphere. Although it was not big, it gave off a majestic feeling. It did not feel like a weapon. Instead, it felt more like a mountain, a galaxy, a natural world. As expected of a treasure for refining weapons. No wonder it's so rare. The fat Taoist priest held his chin and looked at the cauldron in Yifan's body with envy. Bam! A dull sound came from Yifan's body. At that moment, Yifan's mind was immersed in the sea of reincarnation. He stepped onto the divine bridge and crossed the sea. He crossed the sea of misery and came to the end. It was a pure land with clouds and mist. High in the sky, he could vaguely see a huge Taoist palace. The Taoist palace corresponded to the chest area of the human body. There were 5 deities there: the heart, lungs, liver, spleen, and kidney. After observing the Taoist palace from afar, Yifan stood up and clasped his fists at Chu Bei after a long while. He immediately ascended to the Taoist palace level. He really is a super monster with the sacred body of the ancients. Ji Ziyue pouted and looked at Yifan with jealousy. Boss Chu, didn't you say that you have an opportunity to become an immortal for me? When will you give it to me? Not far away, the fat Taoist priest, Duanda, looked at Chu Bei with a flattering face. Chu Bei glanced at the expectant Duanda and waved his hand. The proxy ring flew to Duanda and information about the level 1 proxy entered Duanda's mind. At the same time, another shocking news spread in the outside world. Not only did the news cause a huge commotion in the eastern wilderness, but it also spread beyond the eastern wilderness. The former divine king, Jiang Taishu, was still alive. 2 days ago, there was news that a cultivator from the Jiang family accidentally entered the Purple Mountain, Emperor Wu Shi's dojo, and found the divine king, Jiang Taishu. A day ago, the news was confirmed to be true. Jiang Taishu was a rare genius from the Jiang family of the ancients. He had made a name for himself and dominated the eastern wilderness. However, he suddenly disappeared from the eastern wilderness one day. Even the Jiang family had no idea where he went. Is the divine king, Jiang Taishu, still alive? A man who has lived for nearly 5,000 years. It's said that he's been sealed all this time and is on the verge of death. Oh my God. He's been sealed for 5,000 years and he's still alive. It's said that the infinite scripture left by Emperor Wu Shi is in the Purple Mountain. Do you think Jiang Taishu got it? Regardless of whether he got the infinite scripture or not, the Jiang family returned from a rewarding trip. It's rumored that Divine King Jiang has mastered the battle sacred technique of the 9 esoteric secrets. It's said to be the most powerful divine skill in the eastern wilderness. In recent days, the Jiang family of the ancients had been the most active. It's unbelievable that he's still alive after 5,000 years. The Divine King is really tough. If the Jiang family obtains the inheritance of Divine King Jiang and possesses the 9 secrets fighting character formula, which of the other clans of the ancients and sacred grounds will be able to compete with them? If the battle sacred technique of the 9 esoteric secrets really appears, it's not just the eastern wilderness that will be shocked. Those forces outside the eastern wilderness will try their best to get their hands on it. Who can compete with the Divine King when he appears? According to the news, Jiang Taishu was indeed rescued, but he's no different from a dead man. Not only is his physical body almost dead, but his divine consciousness is also almost extinguished. Now, the Jiang family is facing a great enemy. They're guarding Jiang Taishu day and night with their supreme weapons. They're afraid that someone will take advantage of them. The Divine King, Jiang Taishu, used to be a hero. He shocked the world when he was just 20 years old. I didn't expect that he would be past his prime when he reappears. All the forces in the eastern wilderness were discussing the Divine King, Jiang Taishu. Those who knew the inside story side. Such a talented person had ended up in such a state. On the other side, in the divine city closest to the Purple Mountain, the head of the Jiang family stood in the void. He looked into the distance and sighed. His divine king ancestor was too weak. He couldn't be sent back to the Jiang family after coming out of the Purple Mountain. His divine consciousness could be extinguished at any time. Therefore, he could only be sent to the dragon transformation pool in the divine city. The dragon transformation pool was as old as the divine city. It had miraculous healing effects. There was an illusory legend that it had once transformed into a true dragon. It was the only life-saving herb now. In order to save the Divine King, the Jiang family had spread the news to the entire eastern wilderness and offered a sky-high price to buy the life-saving method. Ever since the Divine King Jiang Taishu had fallen into the dragon transformation pool, the atmosphere in the Divine City had clearly changed. There was a faint sense of oppression. Do you know that late last night, the Divine City was shaken? A peerless expert attacked the dragon transformation pool at night and killed one of the Jiang family's grand elders. He almost rushed in. Fortunately, the head of the Jiang family sensed it and activated the Eternal Universe Furnace in time to scare the enemy away. Otherwise, the Divine King would have most likely been killed. The Jiang family is a clan of the ancients. They even have an extreme weapon. Isn't the attacker afraid of the Jiang family's revenge? Hee, I heard that the attacker came from outside the eastern wilderness. Come to think of it, the Divine King back then was famous among the younger generation of the Big Dipper. With this night attack, the Jiang family is now facing a great enemy. They are holding an extreme divine furnace made of phoenix blood scarlet gold to guard the dragon transformation pool. They have also transferred a large number of experts to guard it. As far as I know, some of the powers outside the eastern wilderness that the Divine King provoked back then have already infiltrated the Divine City. More and more experts poured into the Divine City. The atmosphere in the Divine City gradually became tense. Experts with dragon-like vitality were everywhere. There were even some peerless experts whose auras faintly pierced through the sky. Boss, where's your purple origin stone? Cut it open and show it to us. What kind of treasure is inside it? GZUS seemed to have thought of something as soon as she left the forbidden area. Her eyes lit up as she looked at Chu Bei. Yifan and Duanda immediately turned their gazes towards Chu Bei when they heard this. Their eyes were filled with curiosity. Let's cut it open and see. Chu Bei smiled. He waved his right hand, and a light flashed. The purple origin stone that he had snatched appeared in front of Yifan. Yifan held the origin stone. He was stunned at first. Then, he used his finger as a knife and carefully cut the origin stone. Crack! With a crisp sound, the purple origin stone exploded. Then, a huge black shadow pounced out. Yifan was extremely fast. However, due to his slow reaction, he was still directly pounced on by the black shadow. Yifan, who was so shocked that he forgot to use his elemental transformation, was pushed to the ground. Then, a sharp black claw pressed down on him. It was extremely thick. This was a tall creature. The gray hair on its head fell to the ground, and its face was covered. Strands of sunlight passed through the hair and entered its pitch-black eyes, making it look extremely terrifying. Seeing the huge black claw pressing down on him, Yifan immediately came back to his senses. His right hand turned into a thunderbolt and slapped out. After quickly blocking the black claws, he flipped over and sat up, riding on the tall creature's body. When he saw the huge creature's appearance, Yifan's mouth twitched. It was a huge dog. It was much bigger than the huskies that were commonly seen on Earth. It was as big as a cow. Its entire body was as black as ink. It had a square head and big ears. It was even bigger than a tiger. Chapter 290. Oh my God, how did a dog come out of it? You can really get anything out of this dawn stone. GZU's mouth was wide open as she stared at the big black dog in shock. I thought there would be some amazing treasure in this dawn stone. However, this dog looks quite strong. I'm sure its meat will be delicious if I stew it. The fat Taoist priest looked disappointed at first. Then, he rubbed his palms and saliva flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Even Chu Bei was slightly stunned. After a moment of shock, he looked at the big black dog again with a playful look in his eyes. Perhaps it was because of the Emperor's aura in the purple dawn stone. Under the perception of his observation haki, he could only sense that the dawn stone was a living creature and its size. However, now that he looked at it, TSK, this was a powerful being enshrouding heaven. Woof woof. The big black dog was extremely strong and agile. With a strong swing, it threw Yifan off his back. You ungrateful wild dog. I was the one who cut you out of the dawn stone. I was the one who let you see the light of day again. Looking at the big black dog baring its teeth, Yifan was burning with anger. After cursing a few times, he slapped the dog again out of anger. Whoosh! However, the big black dog was very fast. It turned into a black light and dodged to the side. Then, it opened its mouth and bit at Yifan. Bang! Yifan's pupils shrank and a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. He slapped the dog again. In the low collision sound, the big black dog staggered. However, it was not hurt at all. Instead, it bit off a large part of Yifan's clothes. Damn, you wild dog, have you turned into a spirit? If you dare to provoke me again, I'll kill you with a bolt of lightning. Yifan stepped forward and stretched out his 5 fingers. Crackling sounds of thunder could be heard from his fingertips. Woof, you're the wild dog. The big black dog barked at Yifan fiercely and suddenly spoke human language. F***. Yifan staggered and was shocked. This wild dog could speak. It was really a spirit. It really became a dog spirit after staying in the Dawn Stone for so long. Yifan looked at the big black dog in a daze and could not help but mutter. Nothing good comes out of a human's mouth. Do you know how to speak? The large black dog howled, and then fiercely pounced toward Yifan. Its sharp teeth were as white as blades, and it was as if it was going to kill him. Whoosh! Yifan did not hesitate and used the power of the rumble fruit. A thick bolt of lightning hit the big black dog. Woof, woof, woof. Amidst the miserable howls, the large black dog that had been struck by the lightning suddenly stiffened and fell to the ground with a plop. Brat! Roast this wild dog spirit and let this old Taoist have a taste of black dog meat. The fat Taoist Duanda urged. Woof, 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 woof. The big black dog woof. Woof, woof, woof. Woof, 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 woof. Woof, 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 woof. Woof. The big black dog did not give up. It bared its teeth and chased after Woof, woof, woof. Woof, woof, woof. You're even more unreasonable than a bald dog. I'm the Black Emperor. In the ancient times, people called me the Black Emperor. The large black dog bit down on Duanda's arm and dragged it with all his might. There was fury in his voice as he said, "It's not time for me to be born yet, and you guys have actually cut me open. Damn you all." Black Emperor? Woof, woof. You call yourself an emperor? Emperor. Woof, 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 woof. Smelly Taoist. You actually dare to humiliate me. You deserve to die. The large black dog roared twice in succession. It was also at this moment that Duanda heaved a long sigh of relief. Then, he looked at the aggressive large black dog with a mocking expression. The corners of his lips curled up into a sinister smile, as if his scheme had succeeded. He was treacherous and cunning. Woof, 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 woof. Chu Bei shook his head and smiled. Woof, 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 woof. What do you two bastards want to do to this emperor? Facing Yifan and Duanda's mocking gazes, the big black dog shuddered inexplicably. However, all the cells in its body had been paralyzed by the lightning earlier, and it could not move at all. Yifan and Duanda looked at the big black dog playfully. Then, they raised their legs at the same time. I stomp, I stomp, I stomp ruthlessly. I stomp arrogantly. I stomp arrogantly. Brat, continue. Don't stop. Yifan and Duanda ruthlessly stomped on the large black dog's body again and again, as if they were using all of their strength. Woof, woof, woof. You two bastards. How dare you insult me? Wait until this emperor recovers his strength. This emperor will make all of you die a horrible death. If you keep kicking me, I'm going to use my ultimate move. I'll kill you until not even your bones are left. Bang, bang, bang. After a series of stomps, the large black dog continued to bark furiously. Its cries were filled with rage, and it looked as if it wanted nothing more than to chew these two people up and swallow them whole. You still dare to call yourself this emperor? Still thinking of revenge? Continue, continue. Yifan and Duanda became more and more energetic as they kicked. In the end, the two of them even lifted the large black dog into the air. Yifan used the Buddha Mountain Shadowless kick, while Duanda used the Southern Cloud 13 kick. Just think of how high-spirited I was in the past, and how I suppressed the various galaxies. Once I made a name for myself, who dared to not worship me. However, now that my cultivation has dissipated and I've fallen into the hands of you two bastards, I'm actually being humiliated like this. The large black dog looked up into the sky and sighed as if it had accepted its fate. Xiaohei, Wu Shi mentioned you to me in the past. He said that you were docile and obedient, and that you would often accompany him by his side, allowing him to relieve his worries in his later years. However, now that I look at you, you're completely different from Wu Shi's description. You're quite good at pretending to be a great emperor. Chu Bei couldn't bear to watch any longer. He clasped his hands behind his back, and a profound expression appeared on his face. You? Hearing the way Chu Bei addressed him, the large black dog's body suddenly trembled, and his large black eyes widened. Then, bean-sized teardrops actually appeared in his eyes, and they dripped down with patter-patter. Xiaohei, what a familiar name. For tens of thousands of years, only the great emperor that it had always followed had called it that. Moreover, no one knew that it had followed that great emperor, but this person in front of it actually knew this relationship. Could it be that this wild dog still has emotions? Looking at the crying large black dog, Yifan and Duanda both stopped their punches and kicks at the same time, and a trace of pity arose in their hearts. Doggy, don't cry. Gzu's feminine side was revealed. She took a step forward and actually tried to wipe away the tears of the weeping large black dog. Are you an old friend of the great emperor? Do you know where the great emperor is? Xiaohei misses him so much. Woof, woof, woof. The large black dog suddenly crawled on all fours in front of Chu Bei, and it howled loudly in a heart-wrenching manner. Boss, who is this great Emperor Wu Shi you're talking about? Yifan looked at Chu Bei in confusion. He is the last great emperor of the human race in the Antiquity Age, and also the first great emperor to attain Tao with an innate saint body. He is the most powerful great emperor in the history of the human race, and he dominated an entire era. He was undefeated in all his life, and the forbidden zone of life was intimidated. Chu Bei clasped his hands behind his back, and his expression was indifferent. Who is the peak at the end of the path to immortality? That's what the world thinks of him. Holy **T. Who would have thought that a stray dog like you would have such a powerful background? You actually managed to become Emperor Wu Shi's pet. No wonder you're so tough. Duanda exclaimed as he looked at the large black dog. You'll follow me from now on, and you'll see great Emperor Wu Shi one day, Chu Bei said calmly. Chapter 291. Xiaohei will follow you closely. The big black dog bowed to Chu Bei respectfully. However, his eyes were still filled with hatred when he looked at Yifan and Duanda. Boss, where are we going next? Yifan asked. Since you have already stepped into the Tao Palace realm, I'll bring you to see the new sutra on this trip, replied Chu Bei. Yifan was curious. New scriptures? In the Sea of Reincarnation realm, the Tao scriptures are the strongest. In the Doctrine Palace realm, the Western Emperor scriptures are the strongest. Chu Bei smiled knowingly. Then, he waved his right hand. With a flash of lightning, he disappeared with Yifan, Gzue, and the others. Father, I bought a pot of divine spring water. I think it will be useful. In a huge mansion in the divine city, Jiang Yifei ran into a secret entrance. Good, very good. It was a middle-aged man in a gray robe. After taking the pot from Jiang Yifei's hand, he rushed into the depths of the mansion. Judging from the aura released from his body, he was obviously an almighty expert. The secret entrance led to an underground palace. The dragon transformation pool was located in this space. In the underground palace, clouds and mist lingered. A holy aura surged under the ground. Divine energy flowed, and there was an intimidating pressure. Looking over, a huge divine furnace made of phoenix blood gold was at the center. It was the Jiang family's ultimate weapon, the eternal universe divine furnace. At this moment, a group of old men sat cross-legged in the underground palace. They occupied various important positions. They were either the Jiang family's supreme elders or the ancestral patriarchs. Behind the eternal universe divine furnace, there was a dragon transformation pool that was 30 feet wide. The pool water was milky white and crystal clear. There was a body that looked like a skeleton. Its flesh and blood were completely dried up. There was no luster at all. It was wrapped around the bones. He lay in the dragon transformation pool, motionless. It was as if he had lost his life. There was no sense of vitality. He was no different from a piece of dead wood. Is this the divine king ancestral patriarch? Zhang Yifei could hardly believe what he was seeing. This was the first time he had come to the underground palace. Zhang Yifei exhaled deeply. There were just far too many records about this ancestor god king in the genealogy. It was exactly because of this that he found it very difficult to connect the ancestor god king in the genealogy to the one before him. According to the genealogy, Boss Zong was as handsome as Jade, and his battle prowess was world-shaking. No matter where he went, he would attract attention. He was a peerless hero of his generation. Over 4,000 years ago, he was valiant and looked down upon the world. But now, he was like a withered stick, thin and weak. How sorrowful was this? A beauty past her prime, a hero at the end of his road. These were the most helpless sorrows in the world. He was a heaven-warping genius with a world-shocking appearance. He was originally a heaven's pride of his generation, yet he ended up in such a state. It made one sigh and shed silent tears. Yifei, the undercurrent in the city is surging. I have an ominous premonition. I'm afraid that only Boss Chu can save Boss Zong. Now, leave with little Tingting and find Boss Chu. Maybe Boss Chu can help us solve this crisis for little Tingting's sake. The middle-aged man looked at Zhang Yifei and said, I'll do it now. Zhang Yifei quickly left after saying that. Boss, shouldn't the Western Emperor scripture be at Jade Lake? Then where is this place? Yifan looked around and looked at Chu Bei with a puzzled expression. They landed in front of a huge mountain rock. Behind them, there were many peaks and grand abandoned palaces. These palaces were paved with jade. They were smooth and clean, without a speck of dust. However, they were empty and there was no one to be seen. In front of them, there were several connected stone walls. There were countless carvings on the stone walls. This is the Jade Lake ancient land. Back then, I followed Emperor Wu Shi here. The Black Emperor looked around and was stunned at first. Then, he exclaimed in surprise. After tens of thousands of years, the new Jade Lake ancient land had moved hundreds of kilometers away. Could the legendary Western Emperor scripture be here? Duanda's eyes lit up. Back then, the Western Emperor scripture was carved on this stone wall when the Queen Mother of the West was enlightened here. Chu Bei pointed at the stone wall. But I don't see the scripture. Ji Ziyue pouted and mumbled. At a rough glance, there were about 500 engravings on the stone wall. There were engravings of birds, wild beasts, and humans. Most of the engravings were vivid and lifelike. Although there were many engravings, if one were to really count them, only one of them was somewhat special. It was a mural of a woman. The woman on the mural gave people the feeling that she was one with nature. The more they looked at it, the more illusory it felt. Some things are right in front of you, but you can't see them with your eyes. Chu Bei smiled and then placed his right palm on the stone wall. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The entire stone mountain was suddenly filled with a brilliant light. At that moment, the hundreds of carvings on the stone wall seemed to have come to life as they emitted a dazzling divine light. Then, with a strange buzzing sound, big red words appeared on the stone wall one after another. These big red words were arranged in an orderly manner and could be divided into 5 big areas. The divine treasure of the heart, divine treasure of the liver, divine treasure of the lungs, divine treasure of the kidney, and divine treasure of the spleen. They correspond to 5 areas. Looking at the big red words on the stone wall, Yifan's face was filled with joy. Yifan quickly entered the state. After memorizing the scripture, he sat cross-legged and began to practice the cultivation method of the divine treasure of the heart according to the first chapter. Suddenly, Yifan became motionless. His expression was calm and detached as he was completely immersed in a state of Tao. Although Duanda, the Black Emperor, and Jizue did not cultivate, they still memorized the scripture. Gradually, Yifan's body changed. The fiery red essence in the divine treasure of the heart was visible to the naked eye. Swoosh, swoosh. Not long after, amidst the sound of air being torn apart, several long arcs approached from afar and appeared above Chu Bei and the others. Boss Chu, why are you in the Jade Lake ancient land? The leader of the group exclaimed in surprise when he saw Chu Bei's appearance. Chu Bei looked up and glanced at the Jade Lake sacred leader and the elders behind her, whom he had met not long ago. His lips curled up slightly as a form of greeting. This is the complete West Emperor scripture chapter. The Jade Lake sacred leader looked away from Chu Bei. When she saw the 5 big red words on the stone wall, she was stunned. When she saw the words clearly, her face was filled with shock. After the shock, she was even more excited. Sacred leader, I did not expect the scripture that we have been searching so hard for to be here. We have finally found it. The elders behind the Jade Lake sacred leader were overjoyed as well. Since you are all here, then comprehend it together and complete the missing parts. Chu Bei glanced at the Jade Lake sacred leader and the rest. The Jade Lake sacred leader nodded and turned to look at someone behind her. Go back and gather all the elders. Ask them to come to the ancient land immediately. Do any of you know where Boss Chu is? The Jiang family is looking for him at an exorbitant price. Why is the Jiang family looking for Boss Chu? Is it because of the Jiang family's divine king? Boss Chu? Hee, I know where he is. You think you know? The Jiang family's exorbitant price is not easy to earn. If you lie to them, the consequences will be dire. Your old flame is from the Jade Lake Holy Land. Is Boss Chu in the Jade Lake Holy Land now? Ever since the Jiang family offered 10 black origins as the price, all the cultivators in Eastern Wilderness were frantically searching for Chu Bei's whereabouts. 6 hours later, in front of the Jade Lake sacred ground, Yifan suddenly opened his eyes. The 5 secret chambers in his body turned into tens of thousands of flames and rushed into the mark on the stone cliff. Boss, I've practiced it once. In this realm, it seems that as long as I have an endless supply of origin energy, I can break through without any bottlenecks. Yifan looked at Chu Bei and said, Not bad. Chu Bei nodded in satisfaction. He had to admit that Yifan was very smart. Just as Yifan said, the sacred body of the ancients had an advantage in this realm. As long as he had enough origin energy, he could break through all the way. Looking around, Yifan saw hundreds of Jade Lake elders sitting cross-legged. The 5 secret chambers were glowing. Big brother. Just then, a crisp voice was heard. Boss, that's little Ting Ting. Jizue's eyes lit up. Her canine teeth sparkled. She immediately went forward and hugged Jiang Ting Ting. At this moment, little Ting Ting's clothes were no longer shabby and full of patches, but a pure white gauze dress, just like a little fairy. Little Ting Ting, why are you here? Yifan pinched Jiang Ting Ting's face. Brother Yifei is looking for the boss, so I came with him. Jiang Ting Ting looked innocent. Hearing that, Yifan and Jizue looked at Jiang Yifei suspiciously. Their eyes were filled with questions. Boss, to be honest, I'm here to ask you for a favor. The boss of the Jiang family 4,000 years ago, the divine king Jiang Taishu, was found in the Purple Mountain a few days ago. However, he's in critical condition now. Some of the top forces outside of the Eastern Wilderness have also heard the news. There are many hostile forces who want to kill the divine king. On behalf of the Jiang family, I sincerely ask for your help to save the divine king and the Jiang family from this crisis. After saying that, Jiang Yifei knelt in front of Chu Bei with a thud. He clasped his hands and looked sincere. The divine king Jiang Taishu, Chu Bei muttered in a low voice. Then, he lifted Jiang Yifei up and stared into the distance. Get up. I can go with you and take a look. However, after the matter is settled, you will have to pay me. Of course. Thank you, boss. Hearing Chu Bei's words, Jiang Yifei was stunned at first. When he came back to his senses, his face was filled with excitement. Obviously, he He did not expect Boss Chu to be so easy to talk to. He had even thought about how to use Tingting's relationship with him to ask for help again if he was rejected. In an underground palace in the Divine City, the dragon transformation pool was crystal clear. The pool water was milky white, and there was a fragrance coming from it. The withered body was motionless and seemed to have lost all signs of life. Chapter 292. How strong must his will be to support the deity king to reach this level? The Jiang family master stood before the dragon transformation pool and looked at the withered body in the pool with respect. Jiang Taishu, the Jiang family's deity king, was once a hero who looked down on the world, but now he was only filled with endless sorrow. Since ancient times, beauties would lament that heroes were not allowed to see old age. Fate was full of misfortune, and heroes were at their end. Family Master, the deity king's body is almost dead, and his divine sense is about to be destroyed. I'm afraid. A grand elder frowned. Even with the divine spring and life-saving divine medicine, the situation was still not optimistic. For the past 3 days, we have been using spiritual medicines to help him recover, but there is almost no effect. Another sigh was heard. Although Ife bought a bottle of divine spring water, the medicinal power of the water is too strong. The deity king is so weak. I'm afraid that if we use too much, he won't be able to withstand it. Jiang Yun shook his head and was in a dilemma. Looking at the deity king's situation, his last trace of life will disappear at any time. We have no other choice. The Jiang family master took a deep breath and ordered after some hesitation, "Continue to pour in the divine spring water." After receiving the order, the 9 old men with hair as white as snow sat around the dragon transformation pool again. The jade gourd containing the divine spring water floated above the dragon transformation pool, and the crystal-clear liquid dripped down. Innate divine light rushed out of the 9 old men's heads and merged into the liquid, refining it into innate essence and entering the old deity king's withered body. Deity King Jiang Taishu's body was too weak, so they could only work together to refine 1 drop at a time and slowly inject it into Jiang Taishu's body. Maybe it was because refining the divine spring water consumed too much spiritual power, but the 9 old men's faces gradually turned pale and they were about to collapse. They were very attentive, injecting their innate life force into the divine spring to prolong the old deity king's life. Dang! Suddenly, the sound of metal clanking resounded throughout the entire divine city. The vast underground palace was shaken, and the Jiang family cultivators around the dragon transformation pool were shocked. This aura is specifically targeted at the dragon transformation pool. Not good. A peerless expert is here. Who is this? The eternal universe divine cauldron is guarding the dragon transformation pool, and he dares to offend it? Could it be those people from Zhong Prefecture? Everyone, including the head of the Jiang family and Jiang Yun, frowned. Since the enemy dared to offend them, they must have a way to escape unscathed. Jiang Yun, activate the eternal universe divine furnace. The head of the Jiang clan gave the order, while he himself stood in front of the dragon transformation pool, guarding Jiang Taishu in the pool with vigilance. Buzz. Suddenly, the void outside the underground palace rumbled like a rag being violently shaken by someone. Even the underground palace was affected, as if a great earthquake had occurred. Fortunately, the master of the Jiang family acted in time and shot out several rays of light to ensure that the dragon transformation pool was not affected at all. At the same time, outside the underground palace, everyone in the divine city was alarmed. All of them raised their eyes to look in the direction of the underground palace. From afar, the crimson clouds rushed into the sky and the cries of phoenixes shook the heavens. It was as if a divine phoenix was born from the flames and soared through the 9 heavens and 10 earths. An unimaginable pressure enveloped the entire city in an instant. No one could resist it. Some of the weaker cultivators even collapsed to the ground. Many cultivators' souls trembled and could not help but bow down. This was completely involuntary. It was as if they were facing a god and were filled with innate reverence. Obviously, this was an extreme divine power, as expected of an ancient family that has been passed down since the primordial age. The Eternal Universe Divine Furnace is indeed a Thearch's weapon. Even if it is activated by an almighty, it already has such an aura. If the Jiang family's The Arch was still here, how imposing would it be? The Jiang family's Divine Furnace has been activated. Could it be that the top experts of the hidden forces could not help but make a move? A divine king of a generation, even if his life is in danger, is still a nightmarish existence to those forces in the central state. The cultivators in the divine city looked above the underground palace in a daze, dumbfounded. Even some of the older generation's lips were trembling. The divine sun cauldron made of crimson phoenix blood rushed out of the underground palace and hovered above it. It seemed to have become the only thing in the world. Even though it was far away, its aura seeped into the bones of every cultivator in the divine city, leaving a deep impression on them. Family head. The previous invaders have all been destroyed by the divine furnace and turned into dust. However, they are not real people, but 4 ancient corpses. In front of the dragon transformation pool, Zhang Yun looked at the Jiang family head and said, "Ancient corpses?" The Jiang family head frowned. What were the cultivation levels of these ancient corpses when they were alive? They are all almighties that have passed away since the primordial age. According to my guess, there should be a terrifying person hiding in the dark controlling them. As soon as Zhang Yun's voice fell, all the grand elders beside the dragon transformation pool gasped. The corpses of ancient almighties were difficult to find, but the person hiding in the dark actually had 4 of them. He was definitely a terrifying expert with a terrifying background. He did not hesitate to destroy 4 powerful corpses to test the waters. The background of this hidden person is not ordinary. The Jiang family's patriarch sighed, and his frown deepened. He could feel the severity of the situation. He looked at Zhang Yun and said, "Be on high alert. If anyone of unknown origin approaches the underground palace, use the divine furnace to suppress them." However, not long after the Jiang family head's voice fell, the Eternal Universe Divine Furnace trembled again and released a monstrous divine power. "Is there another invasion?" The Jiang family head asked quickly with a solemn expression. Zhang Yun nodded. The invaders are a pair of human-shaped weapons cultivated with blood essence. They have already intertwined with the power of laws, but they have been turned into dust by the divine furnace. Judging from their aura, they are not the same group of people who controlled the Almighty's corpses. However, the other party is willing to release such weapons. I'm afraid they are at least almighties, Zhang Yun added. Rumble. Less than 15 minutes after the second wave of tests, the third, fourth, and fifth waves of tests came one after another. These tests came from different forces. Fortunately, they were far from being able to compete with the supreme weapons. What exactly are they relying on? With these probing attacks, they can't even shake the Jiang family's Eternal Universe Divine Furnace. As the frequency of attacks from the outside increased, the atmosphere in the underground palace became heavy. A storm was brewing. Everyone could feel the seriousness of the situation. Perhaps there would be a thunderous attack soon. Oh no! At this moment, Zhang Yun, who was activating the Eternal Universe Divine Furnace, was shocked. I can feel the aura of another supreme weapon. What? The number of supreme weapon in the entire Central Plains can be counted with one hand. Can you determine what kind of supreme weapon it is? The Jiang family head and the supreme elders were extremely gloomy. Supreme weapon? Which sacred ground in Central Plains is it? The supreme elders of the Jiang family clenched their fists. I don't know for now. Zhang Yun shook his head. This supreme weapon is hidden in the dark. Moreover, it has only released a little aura and has not been fully activated. Are we really going to have a war with the sacred grounds? There hasn't been a war between the sacred grounds for thousands of years. Are they going to start a war? A supreme elder shouted angrily. Rumble. Suddenly, there was a loud boom and an extremely terrifying aura came from above the underground palace. Sensing this aura, the Jiang family's cultivators were extremely gloomy. They were all too familiar with this aura. It was the awakening of the supreme weapon. Quick! Activate the Eternal Universe Divine Furnace with all your might. The Jiang family head shouted. Are they crazy? Are they so afraid of the Supreme Being? They don't mind starting a war between the sacred grounds. Other than the 9 supreme elders who were refining the divine spring water for Jiang Taishu around the dragon transformation pool, the rest of the supreme elders injected their spiritual energy into the eternal universe divine furnace. Buzz. The earth trembled as if the world had been pierced through. A vast pressure surged out from the distant sky, directly smashing down on the location of the underground palace. Almost at the same time, the eternal universe divine furnace made of phoenix blood shone brightly. A divine phoenix soared into the sky, and its cry resounded through the clouds. Can you determine which supreme weapon it is now? The Jiang family head frowned and looked at Jiang Yun above the dragon transformation pool. Under the majestic aura of the supreme weapon, the dragon transformation pool was still affected even with the eternal universe divine furnace. The pool shook violently, and the milky white water splashed high into the air. It's not any supreme weapon that we know of, Jiang Yun replied. Who is it? The Jiang family head narrowed his eyes. Protect the Supreme Being at all costs. If they want to fight, the Jiang family will fight. The group of Jiang family cultivators shouted with determination in their eyes. It was as if they were prepared to fight to the death. At the Jade Lake Ancient Land. Boss, I thank you on behalf of the entire Jade Lake Sacred Ground. If not for you, the West Emperor scripture carved by the Queen Mother would not have appeared even after a few thousand years. The Jade Lake Sacred Leader bowed to Chu Bei. After a pause, she said, Boss, I have a request. Please, don't worry. The West Emperor scripture is your Jade Lake Sacred Ground scripture. After I take it, I will not spread it to the outside world. Before the Jade Lake Sacred Leader could finish speaking, Chu Bei had already guessed what she was thinking. He waved his hand and smiled. After saying that, Chu Bei took away the Western Emperor scripture under coercion and offered it to the system. Thank you for your understanding. The Jade Lake Sacred Leader was grateful. Let's go to the Divine City to take a look. Chu Bei nodded at the Jade Lake Sacred Leader and then looked at Zhang Yifei, who was waiting anxiously. He waved his hand, and lightning flashed. Amidst the thunder, the group disappeared from the Jade Lake Sacred Ground with the dog. Above the underground palace in the Divine City, the mysterious supreme weapon hidden in the void was getting more and more powerful. It was like a raging ocean that seemed to be able to penetrate the heavens and the earth. If not for the eternal universe divine furnace, the underground palace would have been destroyed. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Several rainbows flew across the underground palace. Almost 100 grand elders of the Jiang family hovered in the air and looked at the sky coldly. Since you are here, why are you hiding? The Jiang family head was at the front. He snorted and placed his right hand on the eternal universe divine furnace. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Suddenly, the eternal universe divine furnace hummed as if it had been injected with fresh blood. It shone brightly, and a golden divine phoenix soared into the sky. A beam of crimson light with a diameter of 1,000 feet shot into the distant sky. Soon, the aura of the extreme Tao Emperor weapon hidden in the void weakened, as if it was being suppressed. At the same time, the cultivators who were close to the underground palace flew away, afraid that they would be affected. The entire divine city was in an uproar. Is that also a supreme weapon? Oh my God, is this a battle between supreme weapons? It's a pity that we can't see the supreme weapon hidden in the void. If the two imperial weapons were to really collide, the entire divine city would suffer a calamity. In the divine city, the cultivators in every corner looked at the sky above the underground palace in fear. It was as if the Milky Way was descending from the 9 heavens. Divine light shone in all directions, and the sky was burning with red light. Rumble. Under everyone's shocked gaze, the eternal universe divine furnace made of golden phoenix blood suddenly released a dazzling light. From afar, it looked like a scorching sun that lit up the world. One could even see a divine phoenix spreading its wings and pressing down on the sky above the divine city. It was so huge that it covered the entire sky. Compared to the increasingly powerful eternal universe divine furnace, the emperor's might released by the apex weapon hidden in the void grew weaker and weaker. Perhaps it was deliberately hiding and did not want to be exposed to the world. Soon, it was completely suppressed by the eternal universe divine furnace and could no longer release its terrifying emperor's aura. Jiang Taishu must die. Suddenly, a deep and hoarse voice that sounded like it came from hell spread out from the void. In the next moment, the hidden emperor's aura disappeared into thin air. Who is it? The Jiang family head was shocked when he heard the cold voice. Judging from the aura that the other party had released, the other party's cultivation was at least at the peak of the supreme being realm. The Jiang family head shouted, but the person hidden in the dark did not give him any answer. As the hidden emperor's aura disappeared, the underground palace gradually calmed down. However, the cultivators of the Jiang family did not dare to slack off because they knew that the emperor's weapon was still lurking around and could attack at any time. Family head, the divine king is alive. It's alive. Suddenly, an excited voice came from the underground palace. The voice was filled with excitement. The Jiang family head was overjoyed when he heard that. He took a step forward and appeared above the dragon transformation pool. At that moment, the 9 old men were still in different positions refining the divine spring water. However, the divine spring water had given birth to 9 dazzling little dragons. The 9 little dragons coiled around Jiang Taishu's body like 9 real dragons that were transforming. They were like living creatures that were almost sentient, causing his withered body to become sparkling and translucent. This divine spring water is amazing. It's worthy of being an ancient divine medicine. It contains the essence of the immortal substance and can revive the dead. The people of the Jiang family beside the dragon transformation pool were overjoyed. As long as the divine king ancestor was alive, the Jiang family would surpass all the other families and sacred grounds. Whoosh! The water in the dragon transformation pool was boiling. A demonic light shot up into the sky, releasing a vigorous aura of life. What a powerful aura fluctuation! Could it be that the divine king Jiang Taishu is alive? Judging by this aura, it should be soon. I didn't expect the Jiang family to succeed. In the divine city, a group of cultivators looked in the direction of the divine city with surprise. Chapter 293. We can't wait any longer. At that moment, several streaks of light streaked across the sky from the north of the divine city and appeared above the underground palace. Jiang Taishu, die. Above the underground palace, 13 silhouettes floated in the air. Their bodies emitted a terrifying aura that covered the sky and covered the earth as they rushed over. Judging from their auras, they should all be almighties. Why are there so many overlords all of a sudden? None of their auras are weaker than the Jiang family's family head. They should be from outside the eastern wilderness. They are either the family heads of the clan of the ancients or the sacred leaders of the sacred grounds. Speaking of which, how many factions did divine King Jiang Taishu offend in the past? He actually attracted so many almighties to kill him. All the cultivators in the divine city looked above the underground palace. There, 13 streams of vigorous blood chi soared into the sky. Each of the blood dragons was extremely thick as they connected the sky and the ground. Their auras were majestic, and their divine power surged like an ocean. The 13 figures' blood chi burned fiercely and reached the sky. They were so powerful that it made people tremble. These sacred leaders were scattered above the underground palace. Their blood chi intertwined like an ocean, intimidating the cultivators from afar. They did not know each other before, but they had the same goal now, to kill the divine King Jiang Taishu. Middle Ground's Fong family, Li family, Ding family, Colored Glass Sacred Ground, 100 Beginnings Sacred Ground, how dare you? The Jiang family's family head scanned the 13 figures coldly and announced the factions behind them. Give up. If Jiang Taishu dies, your Jiang family can still continue. If you insist on feudal struggle, there will be no Jiang family in the eastern wilderness in the future. One of the almighties looked at the Jiang family's family head and said coldly, You want to offend the divine king? You are not qualified. The Jiang family's family head shouted coldly. He pressed his hands on the eternal universe cauldron, and a majestic spirit chi surged out of his body. The divine cauldron suddenly came to life again. Rays of light shot into the sky, and the entire divine city shook. The phoenix blood red gold intertwined with the great Tao and covered the sky. Family head, let us help you. Jiang Yun and the Grand Elder sent their spirit chi into the eternal universe divine cauldron. After gathering the power of 2 almighties and many half-step almighties, the eternal universe divine furnace let out a deafening buzz. In the next moment, unparalleled divine might surged like a great river entering the sea. It surged and roared like a red sun descending from the sky, bombarding the heavens. Under the dazzling light, the eternal universe divine furnace shook the 9 heavens above and the 9 underworlds below. It was as if it had become the only sacred furnace in the world, suppressing everything and becoming an eternal divine object. The might of an imperial armament? The 13 Almighties glanced at the eternal universe divine cauldron that was becoming more and more terrifying. They looked at each other and frowned. Their expressions became serious. Leave the eternal universe divine furnace to me. As for Jiang Taishu, I'll leave him to you guys. Just as the eternal universe divine cauldron was about to unleash its monstrous divine might and blast towards the 13 Almighties, the hoarse voice that was previously hidden in the void drifted out once more. After that, the space above the eternal universe divine furnace warped, and then a completely golden sword with a crescent moon and sun imprinted on it appeared. Yin-Yang divine sword. The Jiang family had exclaimed when he saw the appearance of the sword. Although the whereabouts of the Yin-Yang divine sword was unknown, according to the ancient records, the sword was indeed an imperial armament and had a fierce reputation during the Antiquity Age. The Yin-Yang divine sword pierced through the void and the tip of the sword fell. With a buzzing sound, it hit the eternal universe divine furnace. Oh no, I can't control it anymore. Jiang Yun's face changed drastically. The eternal universe divine furnace seemed to be provoked by the Yin-Yang divine sword. It seemed to have broken free from the Jiang family's control and took the initiative to attack the Yin-Yang divine sword instead of the 13 Almighties. The eternal universe divine furnace turned into a huge divine phoenix that spread its wings. With a clear and distant cry of the phoenix, it swept towards the Yin-Yang divine sword. Wherever it passed, the aura of an ancient emperor filled the air. At the same time, the Yin-Yang divine sword trembled like an ancient ferocious beast that opened its mouth and swallowed the heavens and earth. In an instant, it sucked out all the essence energy in the divine city and attacked the eternal universe divine furnace. 2 terrifying waves of energy surged like a vast ocean. It was as if 2 ancient emperors were born and 2 gods were looking down on the world. Boom! The collision between the emperor weapons made the heavens and earth turn eternal in an instant. Even though they were a few kilometers away, the cultivators could not help but feel suffocated. I've already restrained the eternal universe divine furnace. What are you waiting for? The hoarse voice sounded again in the dark. Hearing that, the 13 Almighties looked at each other and instantly closed in on the underground palace. The Jiang family's biggest trump card is restrained by another emperor weapon. The Divine King is in danger. The Divine King, Jiang Taishu, used to be a hero who looked down on the world. No one dared to provoke him. Now, someone is knocking on his door and trying to kill him. Compared to the Divine King who was unparalleled 4,000 years ago, it's sad that he's like this in his twilight years. A hero is not allowed to grow old in the mortal world. The cultivators who were watching from afar sighed. As long as we're still around, we won't allow you to offend the Divine King Patriarch. The Jiang family patriarch shouted. His voice shook the entire divine city and clearly reached everyone's ears. If time was reversed 4,000 years ago, who would dare to fight with the Divine King of our family? Now that he's old and miserable, his life is in danger. What kind of top experts are you? Jiang Yun and the Jiang family patriarch stood side by side. Their voices were cold and murderous. Haha, time makes people grow old. He shouldn't be living in this era. He should have died long ago. Why do you have to do this? One of the Almighties slapped down with his deep voice. Kill Jiang Taishu. Cut off Jiang Taishu's head. Search his soul and obtain the 9 esotericas. Chilling words came out of the 13 almighty experts' mouths, one after another. All 13 of them were top experts who looked down on others. Their voices were not loud, but they resounded throughout the divine city. They were cold and cruel. Their deep voices were like divine hammers that struck people's hearts. Boom! One of the Almighties slapped down and shattered the ground above the underground palace. Gravel flew everywhere. Another powerful being's attack landed. The ground caved in and cracks appeared. Then, a huge crater appeared. The underground palace was completely exposed to everyone's eyes. Kill. We can't let them offend the Divine King Patriarch. If you want to offend the Divine King, you'll have to step over my dead body first. Protect the Divine King with your life. The Grand Elders of the Jiang family guarded above the underground palace. As they shouted, the Wheel-Sea avatars appeared and attacked the 13 Almighties. You're just a half-step Almighties. How dare you show off? After a sneer, one of the Almighties went up against the 3 Jiang family Supreme Elders. In just one move, the 3 of them were smashed into meat paste. Blood mist filled the air. Come back. You're no match for them. The Jiang family patriarch shouted. The Supreme Elders were courting death in front of the Almighties. Even without the Emperor weapon, I can kill you all. 2 beams of divine light shot out from the Jiang family patriarch's eyes. His voice was filled with rage. A halberd appeared in his hand, and an ancient pagoda appeared above his head. You're just one person. How dare you? 2 of the Almighties approached the Jiang family patriarch. As they moved, the void behind them collapsed. Offend the Divine King Patriarch. Kill. The Jiang family patriarch took a step forward. An ancient pagoda appeared above his head. His battle-intense sword. The black halberd flickered with a cold luster. It pointed at the 2 Almighties and swept them away. Buzz. Suddenly, there was a buzz. The runes on the halberd in the Jiang family patriarch's hand flickered. It drew a black light that cut through the void. With that attack, the 2 Almighties instantly retreated. With every step he took, the void would tremble. Great Emperor Formation runes. The 2 Almighties exclaimed at the same time when they saw the runes on the Jiang family patriarch's halberd. The Jiang family patriarch ignored the 2 Almighties and swept another attack toward their chests. He wanted to cut them in half. Boom! Looking at the halberd that was slashing toward them, the 2 Almighties narrowed their eyes. They shook their hands together to resist the black metal halberd. At the same time, they retreated rhythmically. One of their hands was crystal clear like jade, while the other was crimson like blood. They intertwined with the power of the laws and pierced through the void to resist the halberd. Bang, bang, bang. The Jiang family patriarch waved the halberd faster and faster. At the same time, the ancient pagoda above his head enlarged rapidly and pressed down on the 2 Almighties. In a series of collisions, the void shattered. The 2 Almighties were more or less suppressed. Blood flowed from their wounds. This is the great Emperor Eternal Universe's runes. It's terrifying. When they retreated to a safe place, the 2 Almighties shouted in unison. Their eyes were filled with fear. The Jiang family patriarch's cultivation was roughly the same as theirs. However, he was able to suppress them with the runes left behind by the great emperor. However, the incomplete runes are only a corner of it. It won't be long before the energy in the runes dissipates. Above the underground palace, the 13 Almighties stood side by side. Then, they attacked together. One after another, their attacks landed on the runes of the Jiang family patriarch's halberd. Patriarch, you must hold on for a while longer. Boss's aura is fluctuating. At this moment, an elder beside the dragon transformation pool shouted excitedly. In the milky white pool, 6 of the 9 small dragons that were nurtured by the divine spring had been refined. They had successfully entered Jiang Taishu's body. His body was no longer shriveled. Instead, there were traces of vitality. Although he was still unconscious, there was already a faint fluctuation of aura. His fingers also began to twitch slightly. Kill. Go all out. We must not let Jiang Taishu wake up. The 13 Almighties were filled with murderous intent. Their aura continued to rise as they worked together to destroy the runes in the void. They struck again and again with shocking divine power. Perhaps it was because the existence hidden in the void had heard the voices coming from the dragon transformation pool. He began to control the yin-yang divine sword to attack the dragon transformation pool. Fortunately, every attack was successfully blocked by the eternal universe divine cauldron. As for the Jiang family patriarch and Jiang Yun, the two Almighties, their chi and blood rose. Their essence surged as they charged toward the 13 Almighties without fear of death. Rumble, the battle in the sky became more intense. However, as the great emperor's runes on the Jiang family patriarch's halberd dissipated, the situation became unfavorable. Chapter 294. Divine King Patriarch, I, Jiang Yi, am here. Just as the Jiang family patriarch and Jiang Yun were retreating, a thunderous voice exploded and shook the sky. Then, 3 blood-red flags descended from the sky. They fluttered loudly as if they could shatter heaven and earth. Each of the flags was as red as blood and had a murderous aura. It was as if they had drunk the blood of countless living beings. Clang, clang, clang. The 3 blood-red flags flew into the battlefield. The flagpoles were inserted into the void like pillars that supported the sky. The flags swayed and made clanging sounds. Bloodlight shot into the sky. In the next instant, a group of 70 to 80 people flew over from the north. All of them were riding on savage beasts. Their whale armor was eerie. The roars of the beasts reverberated throughout the divine city. This was a group of powerful riders. They were surrounded by a murderous aura. It was obvious that they had killed countless people. They had gathered an unimaginable amount of murderous aura. Bloodlight lingered around them. The 70 to 80 savage beasts roared. Their iron hooves crushed the sky. In the blink of an eye, they had occupied a part of the void. The leader of this group was a middle-aged man in gray. He was sitting on a rhinoceros beast. His iron armor was shining, and he looked valiant. On his left and right were 2 old men with murderous auras. They were obviously Almighties. Who are those guys? They don't seem to be weaker than the Jiang family of the ancients. I don't know, but I'm sure they are here to help the Jiang family of the ancients and protect the divine king, Jiang Taishu. Looking at the 3 of them, they seem to be Almighties as well. In that case, the Jiang family already has 5 Almighties. In addition to the Jiang family patriarch's great emperor array pattern, they should be able to buy some time. In the divine city, the group of cultivators looked at the powerful riders who had forcefully entered the battlefield. They were shocked. Bandits of the North region, are you trying to become enemies with the major forces of the middle ground? One of the Almighties snorted coldly as he looked at Jiang Yi with a grave expression. The divine king patriarch is in trouble. If I, Jiang Yi, don't come back, I'm not worthy of being a descendant. Jiang Yi waved his hand, and the 3 blood-red flags returned to his hand. Thank you. The head of the Jiang clan looked at Jiang Yi gratefully. I have nothing to do with you anymore. Saving the God King ancestor is part of my duty. It has nothing to do with you. Jiang Yi glanced at the Jiang family head and shouted. Then, he charged toward the 13 mighty figures with 3 spears of blood energy. Jiang Yun and the Jiang family's patriarch didn't hesitate and immediately joined the battle. Rumble. The battlefield became chaotic once again, and all kinds of lights flashed. With the addition of Jiang Yi and the other great bandits, although they were still at a disadvantage, they were able to stall for time. Looking at the side of the dragon transformation pool, 8 of the 9 little dragons had already been refined and merged into Jiang Taishu's body. Only one was left. Why hasn't the God King ancestor come back to life? When the last little dragon was refined into Jiang Taishu's body, the 9 grand elders' faces turned pale as they murmured under their breath. At this moment, Jiang Taishu's withered body had mostly returned to normal, but he still hadn't woken up. Could it be that there's really no way to reverse the situation? The group of grand elders sat paralyzed beside the dragon transformation pool, extremely dejected. At the same time, above the walls of the divine city, a bolt of lightning flashed across. Chu Bei, Yifan, Jizue, Duanda, Jiang Yifei, Jiang Tingting, and a large black dog walked out slowly. Have they already started fighting? Looking at the intense battle above the underground palace, Jiang Yifei's expression instantly became more serious. I didn't expect your gawking ancestor to have done so many immoral things in the past. Those guys who wanted to kill your gawking were all famous figures in the Central Plains. They were all overlords. Duan sighed when he saw the faces of the 13 mighty figures. Stinky Taoist, you're not allowed to insult my boss. Jiang Yifei glared at Duan fiercely, and the veins on his face popped out. TSK, TSK, TSK. There seems to be an incredible figure hiding in the dark. If it weren't for him, that eternal universe divine furnace wouldn't have been restrained. The Yin-Yang divine sword, the sword that the Yin-Yang emperor always carries with him. The Black Emperor's gaze switched back and forth between the eternal universe divine furnace and the Yin-Yang divine sword. His eyes shone. Isn't that the great bandit of the northern region, Jiang Yi? I didn't expect him to be so loyal. He's still willing to lend a hand at this critical moment, Yifan praised when he recognized Jiang Yi. In the air above the intense battlefield, the patriarch of the Jiang clan, Jiang Yi, and Jiang Yun seemed to have sensed the abnormality below. Their expressions were extremely ugly. We have to kill him personally. We can't be careless. However, even though they knew that Jiang Taishu had not woken up, the 13 mighty figures did not slack off at all. They continued to attack like crazy. Brother Taishu. At the edge of the dragon transformation pool, as the Grand Elders looked disheartened at Jiang Taishu in the pool, a ghostly voice rang out, echoing through the entire underground palace and even the sky above. Everyone on the battlefield heard it. This voice was extremely faint. It came from the east and west, from the south, and from the north. It quickly approached the dragon transformation pool. In an instant, whether it was the members of the Jiang clan or the 13 invading mighty figures, everyone's expressions changed. Who's the owner of this voice? To call Jiang Taishu brother, one could imagine how frightening his age was. He was definitely a peerless figure who had lived for more than 4,000 years. Everyone looked around. With a flash of light, an old woman with a face full of wrinkles appeared at the side of the dragon transformation pool. She had a hunched back, and her white hair was sparse. She was leaning on a walking stick like a ghost. The old woman was already beyond recognition. However, she was wearing a 5-colored feather robe that did not match her age. Brother Taishu, it's been 4,000 years. You're really back. I've finally waited for you. The old woman's tears flowed. But I'm already old. I don't have my youth anymore. I really don't want you to see me like this. You're Fairy Rosy Cloud? Hearing the old lady's words, the Jiang clan's clan head, Jiang Yun, and the rest of the Almighties looked at the old lady as if they had seen a ghost. They had never thought that someone of the same generation would still be alive. In the past, Jiang Taishu had dominated the eastern wilderness. Everyone knew about him. His deeds were also recorded in various ancient books. It was because of this that the group of mighty figures quickly guessed the old woman's identity. In the past, she was Jiang Taishu's confidant and the saintess of the All Beginnings Holy Land. The saintess could not marry outside. Thus, Fairy Rosy Cloud could not be together with Jiang Taishu. Thus, Jiang Taishu had forced his way into the All Beginnings Holy Land to take her away. However, Fairy Rosy Cloud remembered her master's kindness and did not leave. However, she had never married a saint's son. She lived alone in the ancient lamp cave, never stepping into the mortal world again. But who would have thought that she would still be alive after more than 4,000 years? In the past, your boss was beaten into submission by Brother Taishu. Now, you lot have become overlords of your own regions. Yet, you still want to join hands to deal with the old Brother Taishu. How laughable. If you juniors want to take Brother Taishu's life, you'll have to step over my dead body first. The old woman looked up and swept her gaze over the 13 mighty figures. Her white hair fluttered in the wind. She pointed her walking stick forward, and an incomparably terrifying pressure erupted. Hundreds and thousands of patterns appeared and wove together. This is God King order. The 13 mighty figures were dumbfounded. The strength of the old woman's attack wasn't too frightening. However, what she used was the great Tao. What she used was the order of the world, and not some simple divine power. This was her comprehension of the Tao. It was an even more terrifying attack method. Fairy Rosy Cloud, why must you do this? You couldn't marry him back then. Now that 4,000 years have passed, are you still unable to let go of him? A mighty figure shook his head and sighed. Do you know that what you are doing now will implicate the All-Beginnings Holy Land behind you? Patriarch, the God-King Old Ancestor's aura has weakened. At this time, a Grand Elder suddenly cried out in alarm, his voice filled with fear. The reason Brother Taishu can't wake up is because he doesn't have enough spirit essence. Leave it to me. Sensing the changes in Jiang Taishu's body, Fairy Rosy Cloud shot a glance at the Jiang family patriarch in the sky. Use everything you have to block these invaders. As her dignified voice fell, the old woman fell into the pond and hugged Jiang Taishu. Brother Taishu, it's been 4,000 years since we last met. Back then, you were as handsome as jade and had a heroic appearance. But now, you have aged to such an extent. Within the dragon transformation pond, the old woman's tears fell like rain. She poured her spirit essence into Jiang Taishu's body. Divine light shone like a waterfall, illuminating the entire dragon transformation pond. Senior Rosy Cloud, you? Seeing this, all the Grand Elders were moved. This is my own choice. You don't need to say anything. The old woman waved her hand at the surrounding Grand Elders. Then, spirit essence rushed out from the top of her head and entered Jiang Taishu's body. The old woman gently stroked Jiang Taishu's face. Tears kept falling from her turbid eyes. In the past, you were unhindered in the world. Who dared to stop you? Now that you have returned in your old age, there are actually so many people who want to kill you. Brother Taishu, you must wake up. The old woman muttered to herself. She was almost begging him. It was as if she had returned to 4,000 years ago. The battle in the sky turned increasingly intense. It caused the sky to darken and even the firmament to crack. Gradually, the old woman's aura weakened. Instead, it was Jiang Taishu's vital fluctuations that became stronger. Vaguely, 9 tiny dragons appeared in his sea of samsara as they let out deep dragon roars. Rosy Cloud, you can forget about reviving Jiang Taishu. With a hoarse bellow, the person hiding in the shadows could no longer endure it. At the instant he appeared from the void, the yin-yang divine sword hummed. The great emperor aura on the sword suddenly surged. Vaguely, it managed to suppress the eternal universe divine cauldron. This did not mean that the yin-yang divine sword was stronger than the eternal universe divine cauldron. Instead, the cultivation level of the person controlling the yin-yang divine sword far exceeded that of the Jiang family's Grand Elders. Clang, clang. Amidst deafening clashing sounds, the yin-yang divine sword attacked the eternal universe divine cauldron while shooting out several sword beams at the old woman. They were extremely fast, as though they were trying to stop her from doing anything. Haha, sovereign of the eventide, you can't stop me. Brother Taishu will definitely live. The old woman laughed out loud. Her body was penetrated by the sword beams as blood flowed out. Brother Taishu, do you know? I really want to walk with you under the setting sun. Unfortunately, there's no time. You will never hear my voice again. By the dragon transformation pool, Fairy Rosy Cloud's turbid eyes turned dimmer. The surrounding Jiang family's Grand Elders tried their best to block the yin-yang divine sword's sword beams to buy time for Fairy Rosy Cloud. Brother Taishu, years ago, you found the earth essence fruit for me to replenish my lifespan. You wanted me to live with you for 4,000 years and die with you in this world. You have finally appeared. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see your revival with my own eyes. The old woman let out a soft bellow as endless divine light surged out from her body. She injected all her essence energy into Jiang Taishu's body. Her body instantly withered as her eyes turned completely dim. Chapter 295. If time could turn back to 4,500 years ago, Brother Taishu, I would go with you. Instead of staying in the Saint Land, the old lady was like a lamp that had run out of oil. She used her last bit of strength to caress Jiang Taishu's face. Her pale lips trembled, and she could not speak. Even though the Supreme Elder had lived for more than 1,000 years, he could not help but shed tears. He could not bear to watch this scene. I don't want to. The old lady's lips trembled. She wanted to say something, but she could not speak. Fairy Rosy Cloud, what do you want to say? One of the Supreme Elders channeled a huge amount of spiritual energy into the old lady's body. After I die, cover my corpse with a white cloth. Tell Brother Taishu not to look at me. I don't want him to see my current appearance. I want his memory to always be of me from 4,000 years ago. All right. The Supreme Elder choked with sobs. Brother Taishu, after all, I can't go with you. After the old lady said this, the last bit of light in her eyes disappeared. Her head fell silently as she leaned against Jiang Taishu. Senior Rosy Cloud. Just as the Jiang family members were crying out in grief, a bolt of lightning appeared above the lightning pool, and a few figures walked out. Ifei, this is? Is he Boss Chu? Boss Chu, please save Fairy Rosy Cloud and old ancestor Shenwang. When the Supreme Elders saw Chu Bei, they were stunned. After guessing his identity, they immediately cupped their fists and bowed. There was a pleading look in their eyes. You actually managed to invite him here. On the battlefield, Zhang Yi held the 3 blood-red flags horizontally. After repelling the 2 mighty figures, his gaze fell on the figure below, and his face was full of surprise. Seeing Chu Bei's arrival, the Jiang family head and Jiang Yun were overjoyed. Although the latter had not seen Chu Bei's strength with his own eyes, he had heard about it from the Jiang family head. He could destroy the combined attack of 6 Supreme Emperor weapons and suppress the Emperor corpse with just a lift of his hand. Who is he? Noticing the expressions of Jiang Yi, the head of the Jiang family, and the rest, the 13 mighty figures focused their gazes on Chu Bei with solemn expressions. Vaguely, this guy gave them a sense of danger. Boss, can she still be saved? Ji Ziyue pointed at the old woman with her small white finger. Chu Bei glanced at Ji Ziyue but did not reply. Boss, that godly king ancestor, he has already woken up. Just as a grand elder of the Jiang clan pointed at Jiang Taishu in the dragon transformation pool and was about to say something, Chu Bei spoke. Quick, look at the divine king ancestor's eyes. There's a drop of crystal. He sensed all of this. Along with a cry of surprise, the Jiang family members suddenly noticed that a drop of crystal was gently rolling down from the corner of Jiang Taishu's shriveled eyes. In the next moment, Jiang Taishu suddenly stood up and opened his eyes. His eyes shone brightly. However, he did not move at all. He only looked at the dead old woman quietly. After a long while, he held the old woman's body with both hands and stood in the dragon transformation pool. He looked up to the sky and let out a sorrowful roar. This roar shook the heavens and the earth. It resounded throughout the divine city and rushed into the clouds, startling everyone. This aura. Is Jiang Taishu the divine king resurrected? The Jiang family did it. He really did it. It seems that the 13 mighty figures from Middle Ground did not manage to kill the divine king. They are now in danger. And that guy who controls the other extreme divine weapon. The cultivators in every corner of the divine city looked in the direction of the underground palace. The sorrowful roar reverberated in their ears. Hearing this voice, they felt an inexplicable sense of disbelief. The flow of spiritual power in their bodies seemed to be suppressed. Did he really come back to life? The 13 Almighties looked at the standing figure below and exchanged glances with each other, their faces full of vigilance. Jiang Taishu, the face of the powerful figure who was controlling the yin-yang magical sword, darkened completely. He roared with a sharp killing intent. Jiang Taishu looked coldly at the figure in the sky. He continued to let out a sorrowful roar that shook the heavens and the earth. It had been 4,000 years. Endless sorrow and pain. The hero was past his prime, and the beauty had withered. How could he not be heartbroken? How could he not be sad? The divine king was sorrowful. His heart was filled with sorrow. The sorrowful roar dispersed the clouds in the night sky. It was like seawater pouring into the nine heavens. Endless sorrow and sorrow filled his eyes. Jiang Taishu hovered above the dragon transformation pool. His flesh had already withered. However, there were tears rolling down from the corners of his eyes. He held the old woman's cold body and did not move. After a long time, the divine king seemed to have turned into stone. He did not make a sound or move. He just looked at old Miser quietly. The beauty was old. Her face was full of wrinkles. Her lips were gray, and her body was bent. Time had taken away her youth. "I'm late." Chu Bei looked at Jiang Taishu and the old woman in his arms. He shook his head and sighed. The beauty of the past had no regrets. She waited for 4,000 years. Her youth was gone. Her heart was sad. She waited silently until she was completely old. Even though 4,000 years had passed, Fairy Rosy Clouds heard the news of the Divine King. She risked her life to save Jiang Taishu and died. "Divine King, old ancestor, my condolences," the Jiang family's supreme elder said softly. "Rosy Clouds." Jiang Taishu ignored the supreme elder. He said softly with a trembling voice. He was filled with endless sorrow and regret. He knew that his confidence sacrificed her divine energy to save him. However, he could not do anything. For 1,000 years ago, he was dressed in white and roamed the world. Who could compete with him? Now, he returned in his old age. He could not even save the life of the woman he loved the most. She died to save him. He could not help but feel sad. He looked up at the sky and hugged the cold body tightly. "Ah!" the divine king roared. The endless sorrow turned into a soaring killing intent. At this moment, the entire divine city turned cold. It was as if a gust of autumn wind had swept past. At this moment, endless essence chi of heaven and earth surged into the dragon transformation pool. To be exact, it was flowing into Jiang Taishu's body. "Boss, this divine king of the Jiang family makes my heart ache." Jizua looked at Chu Bei and pointed at Jiang Taishu. She bit her lips with pity in her eyes. He was once a hero of a generation. However, he could only watch his beloved die for him. Duan sighed. It was rare for him to be serious. Chu Bei did not say anything. He just looked at Jiang Taishu in the dragon transformation pool. At this moment, Divine King Jiang Taishu was absorbing the essence chi from all directions. He devoured the moonlight and starlight. His entire body was shrouded in a hazy light. "Why did you cover your body with a white cloth? Why didn't you let me see your face?" Jiang Taishu held the old woman with both hands and choked with sobs. He muttered to himself, "In my eyes, you have never changed. You will always be the same, whether it was 4,000 years ago or now. You like the way you looked when you were young, so I'll let you stay young forever." As the sorrowful voice fell, the essence chi surged like a tidal wave. It surged over one layer after another. Jiang Taishu's hands shone brightly. They were almost transparent. He poured all the essence chi that he had gathered into the old woman's body. "Even if I can't save your soul, I'll awaken your body." With the infusion of essence chi, the old woman's body changed rapidly. Her wrinkled skin slowly smoothed out and gradually shone. Her sparse hair started to grow. "I'll grant you an ageless face," Jiang Taishu shouted. His voice was like the might of thunder. It pierced through heaven and earth and shook the entire divine city. Everyone's eardrums were buzzing. In a moment, Fairy Rosy Cloud seemed to have come back to life. It was as if she had returned to 4,500 years ago. She had a head of black hair, and her body was sparkling. Her peerless beauty was restored. "It's a pity that the beauty has passed away. Her soul has been annihilated," the Black Emperor barked. "All of you will die today." Jiang Taishu slowly put down Fairy Rosy Cloud. He looked up and swept his gaze across the void. His gaze was incomparably sharp. What's there to be afraid of a 4,000-year-old zombie? This is no longer his era. Let's kill him together. The 13 Almighties gathered together and stared coldly at Jiang Taishu. Their killing intent was overwhelming. "Die." As the cold syllable fell, Jiang Taishu appeared in front of the 13 Almighties in a single step. He raised his hand and slapped down. The 13 Almighties could not react in time to the sudden attack. Their pupils constricted, and they instinctively raised their hands to block. Boom! With a loud bang, the void exploded. The 13 Almighties were sent flying almost at the same time. Their chi and blood were in turmoil, and they spat out blood. He's still so terrifying after being sealed for so many years. The 13 Almighties were terrified after they stabilized themselves. Looking at the 13 Almighties who had retreated in an instant, the Jiang family head, Jiang Yi, and Jiang Yun looked at each other with joy. The legendary divine king recorded in the ancient books had returned. Jiang Taishu stepped into the void. His eyes were deep, and his footsteps were like a supreme divine being walking on earth. It's a pity that you haven't recovered your strength from the past. The outcome won't change. Suddenly, a hoarse voice drifted in the air. A black-robed man stepped out in the air. Unknowingly, the yin-yang magical sword had appeared in his hand. Sovereign of the Eventide, Jiang Taishu gave up on attacking the 13 Almighties. His gaze fell on the black-robed man, and his voice was cold. I didn't expect you to still remember me. The black-robed man pointed his sword at Jiang Taishu. Sovereign of the Eventide, have you forgotten the agreement you signed with Eastern Wilderness? What are you trying to do by coming here today? Are you really going to tear up the agreement? The Jiang family head stared at the black-robed man. The agreement can be broken, but Jiang Taishu has to die. At that moment, he had already walked out of the shadows into the open. He had no other choice. The moment cold in the forest said that, the sovereign of the Eventide's gaze landed on Jiang Taishu once again. 4,000 years ago, when you killed my elder brother, did you ever think that such a day would come? 4,000 years ago, the Central Prefecture's twin kings were renowned throughout the world. The elder brother was known as the sovereign of the sun, while the younger brother was known as the sovereign of the Eventide. When the two brothers attacked together, they swept through the world with invincibility. They were known as a pair of peerless geniuses, and few could match them. Divine King Jiang had encountered countless enemies in his life, but the battle with the sovereign of the sun was the most dangerous. It could be said to have shocked the world. They were unstoppable, collapsing countless mountain ranges. After an entire night of battle, Divine King Jiang finally managed to destroy the sovereign of the sun with a shocking strike, forever erasing him from the world. 4,000 years have passed, and you have taken that step. Jiang Taishu seemed to be reminiscing about the past. With a wave of his hand, the eternal universe divine furnace floated in front of him. Clang! Jiang Taishu and the sovereign of the Eventide attacked at the same time, each wielding an extreme weapon. Finally, the battle between the sovereign of the Eventide and the peerless godly king erupted. They charged into the clouds and used all their means. The eternal universe divine furnace and the yin-yang divine sword were also entangled with each other, forming a battlefield of their own. In the sky, the two of them walked in the shattered space. Unlike the battle between the Almighties, the battle between them was a battle of the Great Path. Although it seemed ordinary, it was countless times more dangerous than the battle between the Almighties. That's the 9-word secret battle character formula. Victorious battle technique. Good stuff. The eyes of the large black dog and Duande emitted a golden glow as they stared greedily at Jiang Taishu in the distant sky. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and his eyes were sharp like blades. With a raise of his hand, thousands of sword beams shot out, turning the void into a beehive as it was completely penetrated. The battle sacred technique was an offensive sacred technique. Its destructive power was unparalleled in the world. Boss, who will win between the two? Yi Fan turned his head to look at Chu Bei as he pointed at the battlefield in the sky. He has been sealed for more than 4,000 years. Furthermore, he has only just awakened. Before Chu Bei could finish his sentence, a massive spatial rift tore open in the distant sky. Immediately following that, a figure descended from the sky. Boom! The figure did not land on the ground. It only produced a series of explosions in the void. Godly monarch patriarch. Upon seeing the descending figure, the Jiang family's patriarch, Jiang Yun, and Jiang Yi immediately flew forward to support him. Their faces were filled with worry. You have been defeated by time after all. The sovereign of the eventide slowly descended from the sky. With a wave of his right hand, the yin-yang divine sword landed in his palm. Following that, he pointed the tip of the sword at Jiang Taishu. The sovereign of the eventide emitted a terrifying aura. He was like a god that had descended to inspect the land. I'm indeed a little powerless. Jiang Taishu's words had a self-deprecating tone. However, just as he said that, drops of blood seeped out of his body and floated around his body. Following that, they turned into raging flames with a sizzling sound. Almost at the same time, his aura surged. His exuberant sanguine aura seemed to return to 4,000 years ago. Godly monarch patriarch, no, you must not. Boss, you have just returned. The Jiang family still needs you. Seeing the blood constantly seeping out of Jiang Taishu's body, the Jiang family's patriarch, Jiang Yun, and Jiang Yi had a drastic change in expression. The godly monarch patriarch was burning his blood essence to temporarily restore his peak strength from years ago. What is the background of the sovereign of the eventide? Even the revived Jiang family's godly monarch is not his match? He actually forced a godly monarch to burn his blood essence. The sovereign of the eventide of the Middle Prefecture's twin kings. He was a pinnacle figure of the same era as the Jiang family's godly monarch. For 1,000 years have passed, but he is still alive. Clearly, he has become a godly monarch. It's no wonder the Jiang family's godly monarch was defeated. In the divine city, a group of cultivators looked up at Jiang Taishu, whose sanguine aura was growing stronger, as they sighed incessantly. In your present state, even if you burn your blood essence, this king has nothing to fear. The sovereign of the eventide said coldly, "Then let's fight again." Jiang Taishu suddenly looked up as two golden beams shot out from his eyes. His fighting spirit had reached its peak. His bellow was like thunder as it tore through the world with divine might. It shook the divine city and reverberated in everyone's ears. The Jiang family still needs you. Leave the rest to me. At that moment, an extremely calm voice resounded from the sky. Although the voice was not loud, it had an invisible force that suppressed Jiang Taishu's thunderous bellow. It clearly resounded in the minds of everyone in the divine city. And at that instant, the raging flames around Jiang Taishu's body seemed to be instantly extinguished by a downpour. The blood droplets that floated around his body were forcefully suppressed back into his body. Instantly, Jiang Taishu's aura that had reached its peak fell back to its initial state. Chapter 296. Above the underground palace, a lightning bolt flashed as a figure appeared on the battlefield. The figure looked to be in his 20s. He was dressed in azure-colored robes, and his hands were held behind his back. He stood silently in the void. The youth held an axe that shimmered with silver light. The axe looked ordinary, but on careful inspection, be it the handle or the blade, there was a hazy mist lingering around it that lingered for a long time. This was the Chaos Aura. It had existed since the beginning of the sea and contained a profound great Tao. It was different from the weakened replica in the Battle Break Plain. This was the real heaven-splitting axe. It was one of the 10 great divine artifacts of the primordial universe with supreme divine might. It was also a grade 15 commodity that Chu Bei had exchanged for. Chu Bei hesitated for a long while about whether to use the grade 15 commodity. However, he could not bear to see Jiang Taishu self-destruct. Look, the blood essence around godly monarch Jiang Taishu's body has disappeared. It has returned to his body. His aura has also weakened. What's going on? Could it be that he has a new method to deal with the sovereign of the eventide? It feels like Jiang Taishu's strength has been repressed by an even more powerful force. Who is that youth? The cultivators in every corner of the divine city focused their eyes on the battlefield above the underground palace. Their gazes shifted from Jiang Taishu to Chu Bei. You are? Jiang Taishu looked at Chu Bei in a daze as a look of surprise flashed in his eyes. Just a moment ago, he had burned his blood essence and gathered his aura to an extreme. Just as he was prepared to engage in a true battle with the sovereign of the eventide, An invisible force had forcefully pushed his aura back. The burning blood essence was also forcefully forced back into his body. Godly monarch, he is Boss Chu. We invited him to save you. However, we never expected Fairy Rosy Cloud to arrive first and to sacrifice herself to you. The Jiang family's patriarch came to Jiang Taishu's side and said respectfully, Boss Chu? Could he be an outstanding junior that appeared in the 4,000 years I was sealed? Jiang Taishu muttered softly. Outstanding junior? Bullshit. Duanda also came to the battlefield. Hearing Jiang Taishu's words, he said directly, Your Jiang family's eternal universe emperor is just a junior in front of the boss. Woof, woof, woof. Barks rang out, and the large black dog nodded in agreement. Junior, you dare to insult my ancestor. Hearing Duanda's words, Jiang Taishu's face instantly turned ugly, and a strong pressure came out of his body. However, this pressure hadn't even enveloped Duanda when it was brushed by a wisp of chaotic light, and it instantly dispersed into nothingness. Jiang Taishu's gaze returned to Chu Bei, and the surprise in his eyes deepened. God King, Boss Chu. He really is someone from the primordial era. The master of the Jiang family seemed to be afraid that Jiang Taishu would do something out of line again. He hurriedly lowered his voice and said, Are there really people capable of living from the primordial era until now? Jiang Taishu was slightly bewildered when he heard this, and his muttering carried doubt. Who are you? How dare you interfere in this king's matters? The sovereign of the Eventide held the yin-yang divine sword in hand as he stared coldly at Chu Bei. With a wave of his divine sword, a vast pressure shook the entire divine city. All the cultivators trembled, and it seeped right into their bones. Chu Bei glanced nonchalantly at the sovereign of the Eventide, but he did not say a word. Sovereign King, all you need to do is deal with Jiang Taishu. Leave this fellow of unknown origins to us. The 13 mighty figures looked at the sovereign of the Eventide. At the next moment, a mighty figure attacked. His consciousness was like a sea, transforming into a blood-colored ocean that surged over. He used his terrifying consciousness to attack Chu Bei. Chu Bei did not even look at the mighty figure. He took a leisurely stroll through the void, and when the blood-colored ocean surged over, he casually struck it out. Rumble. Immediately, billowing chaotic light emerged from the void where his palm landed, and extended far into the distance. Almost in an instant, the blood-colored ocean was shattered into pieces. It turned into waves after waves and collapsed in the void. The pupils of the mighty figure that attacked first constricted. However, before he could recover from his shock, the billowing chaotic light had already arrived in front of him. The chaotic light engulfed his body, and with a sizzling sound, his body was reduced to nothingness. With a tragic cry, the mighty figure's soul managed to escape in time. However, before he could go far, the chaotic light intertwined to form a spear. The spear's tip froze the void as it swept forward. Instantly, the mighty figure's soul dissipated amidst the distortion. Finally, one could vaguely see his hideous and horrified expression. Seeing the mighty figure's body and soul dissipate one after another, the other 12 mighty figures immediately felt a chill in their hearts. At their realm, even if their bodies died, as long as their souls did not dissipate, they could survive for a short period of time. Once they found a new body, they could be revived. However, the mighty figure that attacked previously had his soul crushed. He was completely dead. By the side, Jiang Taishu's eyes flashed a look of astonishment. He clearly did not sense any spiritual energy fluctuations from his opponent, but the spear that carried a desolate aura had already struck out. Furthermore, it had instantly killed a mighty figure. On the other side, the sovereign of the Eventide frowned deeply. He began to carefully size up Chu Bei. The yin-yang divine sword in his hand emitted a high-frequency hum. As for the Jiang family's patriarch, Jiang Yi, Duanda, and company, their expressions did not change much. It was as though everything was within their expectations. On the battlefield, Chu Bei's azure-colored robes fluttered in the wind. He turned his head to sweep his gaze across the remaining 12 mighty figures. There was no change in his expression. Don't panic. Hold your ground. He is definitely not the match of all of us alone. As Chu Bei's gaze swept across them, the 12 mighty figures felt a chill in their hearts. Immediately following that, a mighty figure forcefully spoke out to maintain his composure. Attack, everyone. Let's kill him together. The 12 mighty figures looked each other in the eye and encouraged each other. Then, they simultaneously blasted their divine powers at Chu Bei. The divine powers surged like a raging ocean. Raging waves tore through the clouds as they tore through the sky. However, just as the 12 divine powers were about to strike Chu Bei, the axe in his hand trembled. A pitch-black void appeared in front of him as a blinding light surged in the void. The divine powers sank into the void as though they had plunged into a bottomless abyss. Instantly, they vanished without a trace. Severing the firmaments was a heaven-defying technique. Kill. Although the 12 mighty figures were alarmed by Chu Bei's thunderous means, they were no ordinary people. They immediately suppressed the fear in their hearts and shouted in unison. At the next moment, 12 phenomena appeared. One was like a paradise filled with the fragrance of flowers and the chirping of birds. Another was like a dark and lightless underworld. Another was like a rainbow-colored glazed world. Another was like a boundless blood-colored hell. The 12 phenomena were all different. They suppressed Chu Bei at the same time. These phenomena gradually intertwined and were comparable to the great Tao. They emitted a grand, heavenly sound that seemed to have come from ancient times. In an instant, the divine city shook as if it was about to collapse. All the cultivators were stunned. The heavenly sound of the great Tao was like a tsunami, like thousands of soldiers and horses galloping. It was deafening. However, Chu Bei, who was targeted by these phenomena, was unmoved. Rumble. Just as the phenomena were about to suppress Chu Bei waved the axe in his hand. At the edge of the axe, the surging divine light transformed into a vast ocean. To be precise, it was a vast ocean formed by chaotic aura mixed with lightning. In the vast ocean, lightning of various forms intertwined and crackled nonstop. With a loud boom, the 12 phenomena seemed to have met their nemesis and instantly dissipated. Impossible. Looking at the huge phenomena that had disappeared, the expressions of the 12 mighty figures changed abruptly. They were instantly at a loss. However, before they could recover from their shock, a bone-piercing chill suddenly surged out from behind them. In the next moment, the chaotic ocean disappeared inexplicably. Following that, a figure stood in the middle of the 12 of them. The 12 mighty figures' hair stood on end. They had no idea how this person had appeared beside them in an instant. This was different from them piercing through the void without moving. The other party's void teleportation did not have any spiritual chi fluctuations at all. There was no trace of him at all. He had directly disappeared from their senses. Kill. The 4 mighty figures who had reacted first were the first to shout. At the same time, they activated their powerful divine consciousness. At the same time, their sea of reincarnation exploded with a dazzling light, and a tyrannical attack penetrated their bodies. However, Chu Bei's speed was faster and more direct than theirs. He raised his hand and slapped down leisurely in the void. Slap. The slap landed with a crisp sound. However, with such an ordinary slap, the bodies of the 4 mighty figures seemed to have been injected with endless energy. They expanded rapidly and exploded into a bloody mist with a boom. Following that, their spiritual bodies also exploded. No. Looking at the bloody mist floating around them, the remaining 8 mighty figures began to tremble uncontrollably out of fear. At this moment, this mysterious person stood in the middle of them like the Grim Reaper. The 8 mighty figures did not dare to hesitate. They turned around and split into 2 groups and flew in different directions. Swoosh. However, Chu Bei was as fast as a ghost. He was like a wisp of smoke. His body was so fast that they could not catch him. With a slight movement of his feet, he appeared in front of the first group of people in an instant. He raised his hand and slapped down. Slap. There was another crisp sound of a slap. The void distorted. Like the previous four, the four mighty figures expanded rapidly and exploded. As soon as the screams ended, Chu Bei's figure had already appeared in front of the second group of four mighty figures. He raised his hand and slapped it down. Slap. There was the third slap. The last four mighty figures exploded. Flesh and blood splattered all over the battlefield. After casually dealing with the 12 mighty experts with 3 slaps, Chu Bei tidied up his clothes and stretched his muscles a little. However, at that moment, the only sound that could be heard above the underground palace, or to be precise, in the entire divine city, was the crisp sound of Chu Bei twisting his muscles and bones. This was because at that moment, all the cultivators, including Jiang Taishu and the sovereign of the Eventide, were stunned by Chu Bei's 3 slaps. All of them felt like they had been struck by lightning. They stood there in a daze as they looked at Chu Bei in a daze. It took a long time for them to regain their senses. It was as though no one dared to believe the scene in front of them. It was like a dream. The entire divine city was immersed in a deathly silence. After a long while, the deathly silence was replaced by a clamor. And as more and more people regained their senses, the clamor reached its highest point since the beginning of the battle. Heavens, are my eyes playing tricks on me? If you are playing tricks on me, I'm afraid all of us will be blinded. Those were 13 mighty figures. Each of them was in existence at the level of a holy lord in the central prefecture. They were in no way weaker than the Jiang family's patriarch, but these terrifying fellows were actually killed by him with a raise of his hand. Ignoring the first person, the other 12 died in a rather dramatic manner. They were slapped to death by him, slapping 4 mighty figures to death with a single slap. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it even if you beat me to death. He slapped them so lightly. From the looks of it, he didn't use much strength. It was even easier than slapping mosquitoes and grasshoppers. Perhaps even godly monarch Jiang Taishu, or the sovereign of the Eventide, can't do that. Speaking of which, what is his background? What level of cultivation does he have? Could he be above the godly monarch? He seems to resemble a person I've heard of. Could he really be Boss Chu? Who is Boss Chu? Quickly tell us about his deeds. In the Divine City, cultivators from every corner were discussing Chu Bei's background in shock. Their eyes were filled with reverence. Chapter 297. The next 3 chapters are split from Midnight's 10,000-word chapter. Such means, on the battlefield, Jiang Taishu looked at Chu Bei's back in a daze. Suddenly, he began to believe that his opponent was an old monster that had survived from the primordial era. After all, he had already reached the godly monarch realm, but he was still unable to detect his opponent's spiritual energy fluctuations. He could not even capture his opponent's movement trajectory. Boss, those 3 slaps were well done. They were clean and tidy. Duanda, who was standing by the side, took a step forward and looked at Chu Bei with a fawning look. He did not hesitate to flatter him. Yifan, when do you think we will have boss's strength? It feels good just watching it. Gzus said as she tugged at Yifan's arm. Impudent. Call me Brother Fan. Yifan mercilessly pinched Gzus' nose. Not far away, the sovereign of the Eventide swept his gaze across the 3 blood mists that had yet to dissipate. When he looked at Chu Bei again, his expression turned increasingly solemn and ugly. From the means his opponent had displayed, he knew that his opponent was not in existence to be trifled with. Upon thinking of this, the sovereign of the Eventide tightened his grip on the yin-yang divine sword. It's your turn. As the emotionless syllable faded, Chu Bei turned his head to look at the sovereign of the Eventide. A ghostly beam shot out from his eyes. The ghostly beam was extremely fast, and one could vaguely see a brontosaurus in it. Instantly, it tore through the void and appeared in front of the sovereign of the Eventide. The sudden attack clearly caused the sovereign of the Eventide's body to tremble. He subconsciously raised his yin-yang divine sword to block it. Dang! With a metallic hum, the yin-yang divine sword was nearly sent flying by the energy contained in the ghostly beam. However, Even though the yin-yang divine sword had helped the sovereign of the Eventide withstand 90% of the force, the remaining 10% still caused his blood to churn. The sovereign of the Eventide's body trembled violently as he spat out a mouthful of silver blood that splattered onto the city. The silver blood dripped onto a magnificent building below. The building immediately shattered and collapsed with a loud bang after the blood dripped onto it. Silver blood. Why is his blood silver in color? Just a mouthful of blood can cause a building to collapse. What's with his blood? What strange energy does it contain? In the Divine City, a group of cultivators looked at the collapsed building that had been crushed by the sovereign of the Eventide's silver blood. On the ruins, the silver blood was particularly eye-catching. Everyone was bewildered. Just what kind of constitution was this? Almost no one could understand it. They had never heard of it before. Damn you! The sovereign of the Eventide wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth as he stared fiercely at Chu Bei. After a furious roar filled with killing intent, a gigantic statue appeared behind him. It was like the god ancestor that created the world. It had an inviolable majesty that looked down on all life. That's interesting. Seeing the gigantic statue behind the sovereign of the Eventide, the corners of Chu Bei's lips curled up slightly as a teasing smile appeared on his face. What kind of creature is that? In the Divine City, a group of cultivators looked in horror at the towering Buddha statue behind the sovereign of the Eventide. Under this imposing aura, the weaker cultivators could no longer stand straight. Even the powerful elders revealed looks of shock as they found it difficult to maintain their composure. Lord of the Eventide, the great emperor of ancient, descending upon the world. This is the phenomenon of the sovereign of the Eventide. Finally, a few knowledgeable cultivators recalled a rumor and recognized the majestic god. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the statue behind the sovereign of the Eventide constantly expanded. The gigantic figure quickly filled the sky above the Divine City. It was as if a gigantic hand was enough to destroy the massive ancient city. Is this the phenomenon of the sovereign of the Eventide? It's so huge. A god is indeed worthy of being a godly king that has lived for more than 4,000 years. It's too terrifying. The gigantic statue stood behind the sovereign of the Eventide. A pair of eyes that emitted a blood-red glow looked down on the Divine City. Facing such a terrifying gaze, the cultivators in the city were stunned. They felt an indescribable and terrifying pressure. They felt like ants looking up at a god. I never expected this fellow to have some skill. Duande smacked his lips as he looked at the sovereign of the Eventide and gave his evaluation. The Jiang family's head, Jiang Yi and Jiang Yun, exchanged looks. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. Clearly, they did not expect the sovereign of the Eventide to be so powerful. Thankfully, there was the even more terrifying boss Chu present. If not, the outcome would not be optimistic. Zhang Taishu maintained his silence the entire time. However, his expression turned increasingly solemn. In the 4,000 years that he had been sealed, the sovereign of the Eventide had indeed grown a lot. He had even surpassed the Jiang Taishu of the past. Die! The sovereign of the Eventide roared like a bolt of lightning. His roar emanated, filling every corner of the Divine City. It immediately caused the cultivators to turn pale. They could not help but tremble. This was a natural suppression. It was an instinctive fear that came from the depths of one's soul. Boom! The sovereign of the Eventide raised his hand and smacked down at Chu Bei. Following that, the statue behind him reached out its gigantic hand that was filled with runes. The sky trembled as though it was about to collapse. If he was really here, I might have to take him seriously. Chu Bei pointed at the gigantic statue and smiled at the sovereign of the Eventide. The moment his indifferent voice faded, he changed his tone. But it's just a mere phenomenon. It's just a fancy addition to the flowers. With that said, Chu Bei cleaved his axe into the void. Immediately, the sky above the gigantic statue behind the sovereign of the Eventide cracked open. Chaos gases surged out as rumbling thunder descended. Even though Chu Bei had deliberately controlled it, the might of the lightning mixed with the chaos gases still caused many of the palaces beneath to collapse. At that instant, everyone in the divine city felt their ears ring. They were on the brink of collapse and their blood was in turmoil from the tremors. Rumble. Inside the crack, a gigantic chaos hand stretched across the sky. It could be said that it could blot out the sky with a single hand. Instantly, an extremely oppressive might filled every inch of space in the divine city. The cultivators felt as though they were about to undergo a heavenly tribulation as they shuddered in fear. Chi, chi, chi. Amidst a soul-stirring boom, the statue's attack was grabbed by the chaos hand before it could even strike out. Under everyone's astonished gazes, the chaos hand clenched tightly. The statue distorted as the red glow in its eyes dissipated. With a loud bang, it exploded and vanished into nothingness. Almost at the same time, the sovereign of the Eventide's face turned pale. It was as though he had suffered a terrifying backlash. Large mouthfuls of silver blood splattered into the sky. The sovereign of the Eventide staggered and only managed to stabilize his body after a long while. At that moment, a look of horror finally appeared on his face. At the instant the phenomenon behind him was destroyed, he completely understood the difference between him and his opponent. They were on completely different levels. Thinking of leaving? Just as the sovereign of the Eventide moved, a calm and mocking laughter resounded in the sky like thunder. At that instant, the sovereign of the Eventide's body came to a sudden halt, as though he had been restrained by an invisible force. "Sir, do you really want to fight to the death?" The sovereign of the Eventide stared coldly at Chu Bei. "No, only you will die." Chu Bei's lips curled into a smile. Upon hearing Chu Bei's words, the sovereign of the Eventide's expression turned extremely gloomy. With a cold grunt, it was as though he had made a difficult decision. His right hand, which was tightly gripping the yin-yang divine sword, was frantically injecting his blood into the sword hilt. With the injection of the silver blood, the yin-yang divine sword began to vibrate happily, as though it had eaten a delicious meal. Gradually, the sovereign of the Eventide's body doubled in size. His veins protruded as his eyes turned blood red. It was a horrifying sight to behold. Dang! The yin-yang divine sword crazily devoured the sovereign of the Eventide's blood. Finally, a golden divine robe appeared on the surface of his body. The golden divine robe completely enveloped the sovereign of the Eventide, making him look like a dazzling sun. He has the Emperor's spirit blood and can sacrifice an extreme weapon. He is risking his life. By doing so, he can greatly increase the might of the Emperor's spirit blood, but he will also be plunged into an abyss that he cannot extricate himself from. Jiang Taishu looked at the sovereign of the Eventide with a heavy look on his face. With a beckon of his hand, he pushed the Eternal Universe Divine Cauldron in front of Chu Bei. "This is the weapon of our distant ancestor, Emperor Eternal Universe." Chu Bei shot a glance at the Eternal Universe Divine Cauldron and waved his hand to send it back to Jiang Taishu's side. He did not need it. "Even if I die, I will drag all of you down with me." The sovereign of the Eventide's black hair fluttered in the wind. At that moment, he looked like he had transformed into a demon. As his cold voice faded, he held the yin-yang divine sword hilt with both hands and slashed down at Chu Bei. With this strike, a huge rift tore open in the sky, splitting the horizon into two. A terrifying emperor's might emanated. Under this aura, all the cultivators in the city trembled as their legs went limp. At that moment, as they looked at the sovereign of the Eventide in the sky, it was as though they were facing a great emperor that had truly descended upon the world. However, what shocked them even more was that the sword ray that the great emperor brandished with an extreme Dao weapon was actually blocked by the mysterious person with just 2 fingers. At the next moment, there was a crisp cracking sound. The incomparably terrifying sword beam was shattered into pieces by the latter's 2 fingers. "See, is he still human?" Instantly, every corner of the divine city was filled with gasps. All of them stared incredulously at Chu Bei. "I'll be taking your sword." The moment his indifferent voice faded, Chu Bei reached out his left hand. Lightning spewed out from his palm and instantly wrapped around the yin-yang divine's sword like a chain. Clang! With a loud clang, before the sovereign of the eventide could recover from his horror, the yin-yang divine's sword had already left his hands and was floating in front of Chu Bei. "Return my divine sword." After reacting, the sovereign of the eventide's expression changed drastically as he hurriedly exclaimed. His exclamation was filled with horror, as though his life was in someone's hands. Chu Bei looked at the sovereign of the eventide with a deadpan expression. He held the axe hilt and slashed down. Rumble. Immediately, the energy in the surrounding heaven and earth was guided by the axe's blade. It formed a blade beam that extended far into the distance. 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet, 100,000 feet. Looking at the gigantic blade beam above his head, the horror on the sovereign of the eventide's face intensified. Without any hesitation, a ripple appeared around the sovereign of the eventide. But just as he was about to tear through the void to escape, the gigantic blade beam above his head cleaved down. Under this force, the sovereign of the eventide was surprised to find his body restrained. He could not move at all. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.